something to hand out. I'm hoping maybe you could. So I'm a little hesitant to hand out the handouts because I'm concerned people will look down instead of up. But I'm hoping that you will look up, even though you have the handouts. And these are really for when you get home and maybe you forgot what I said. But we're glad you're here. Boy, we couldn't do it without you. I've really been looking forward to this for a long time, and planning it a long time. And I was talking to Roberta in the front row, and some of us were around about 10 years ago. David Keller also. I think those were the ones of us who were part of what was called the Small Church Vitality workshops. I don't know if anybody else was. And I kind of asked when we did this model if we could follow it a little bit, because we went to about 7 churches at that time. So we learned about the churches and we really got connected with one another, besides learning a lot of materials about what it meant to be vital in the small church. And I still have some connections with some of the people from that time 10 years ago. So one of my hopes is that you will get connected to one another. And I said, encourage one another in all you're doing.
Celebration. I don't know whether you know this, but Allison Jacobs is getting remarried tomorrow afternoon.
Oh, she
Who
is?
is one of our leaders.
Yeah. Oh,
Her husband died about 3 years ago, and she's getting married tomorrow.
So my name's Rebecca Massini, and I've been studying the topic today for about 20 years. And I know some other people have studied, well, one other person at least has studied the same place I studied, which was called Leadership in Ministry Workshops, which is now out of Columbia Seminary in Decatur, Georgia, and I'm now on faculty for them. So some people will know what I'm talking about, and they'll say, well, why didn't you mention this, or why didn't you mention that? And I will tell you, as I put today's teaching together, I tried to think about kind of learning this for the first time. And it takes a long time to learn this subject. So I will not touch on all the concepts of family systems theory, just to let you know. So I learned about this through what was called Leadership in Ministry. And this was founded by a Baptist pastor named Larry Matthews. And when I first got a gander of this, he said that what this family systems was about was a way to allow the Holy Spirit to move in a church. I remember him saying the Holy Spirit will move where it decides. It will move where it will, but we can get in the way of the Spirit, or we can have a posture or attitude where it might be a little bit more easier for the Spirit to blow in. And so then he went on and he started talking about family systems theory. And I just was really moved by that. And that was one of the reasons why I started studying this. I have, in the beginning of this workshop, when we had an introduction piece, was that in May, Jim?
Yes.
Yeah. And so people had hopes and intentions for the workshops. And I just wanted to write them down. And I know you probably need glasses to read these photocopies, but it costs a lot of money to photocopy. So I did it as small as I thought I could, and people, if they had glasses, they could see it. But some of the hopes and intentions for the workshops from the churches that were interested in attending all the workshops. So I wrote some of them down, and they are on the pages that I handed out, so you have them. And you know, they are just wonderful thoughts and hopes about being stronger churches and being able to reach out, being curious, being more faithful, just really wonderful intentions. And I left this one for the last one because hopefully I will be talking a little bit about that today in my subject, learning the joy of experimentation rather than the freezing fear of failure. And I've been working on another presentation for my leadership and ministry workshop on trust. And so I had to go back. I studied so much about trust. And one of the things they said about trust is one of the reasons why we are not trusting is because evolutionary wise, we kind of have that freezing failure within us because we have some of the same brains as mammals. And so when mammals went out for the hunt, they only had so much energy for the hunt. So they were much more focused on like the negative, all the risks and the failures of it than the success of it. And I think that is in our brains too. And I think that is related to what we are doing in church, that we kind of have a fear of failure. So as I think about the changes that are happening in society that impact congregations, I've been involved with churches that have really been polarized, and that has affected congregations. Anxiety is in the air in congregations. I have really found it helpful to have a lens to look at congregations, and for me that lens is family systems theory, to look at what's going on. Family systems theory, it looks at anxiety, it looks at kind of the emotional process and emotional system that is in a congregation. It looks at lots of relationships among people, within families, within organizations. It looks at the history of congregations and what is in the DNA of its founding, even the DNA of the founding of the Christian tradition. And it especially looks at our own functioning. Now, when I look at a lens through a congregation, it is not a quick fix. I'm introducing you to, I think you probably all know we are here because we recognize that what's going on in churches, there's no quick fix. And though it sounds simple, what I will be saying, a lot of it might sound common sense, I think it's very deep. I don't know, did anyone see the documentary about Mr. Rogers, Won't You Be My Neighbor? Did anyone see that? That was just so fabulous. But one of the things I remember Mr. Rogers saying is that he went for deep and simple rather than complex and superficial. And in the documentary, they showed the first episode of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. That was in February 1968. And if you know what was happening then, we were in the Vietnam War and things were really heating up. And in Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, the puppet King Friday in the world make-believe wanted to put up a border wall around his castle. And some of his subjects were really concerned about this. And so what they did, they took balloons and they wrote words on it like peace, tolerance, respect. And they set it over the castle wall, and King Friday tore down the wall. And I just thought that was an amazing thing to do for his first show. But he said he went for deep and simple rather than complex and superficial. He was, of course, thinking about television and how children's television was so superficial, full of complex sets and characters, but it was not deep in substance. And that's what he was going for. And that's what I think today I will be sharing with you. So I'm presenting a theory. It's a way of understanding things that may sound simple, but is really deep. And I want to try to use storytelling to try to help you understand this a little bit. And I don't know, does anyone know this childhood book, Understood Betsy? Some people do. It's by Dorothy Canfield Fisher. It was written in the early 20th century. It's one of my favorite books, and it actually, the majority of the books takes place in Vermont. So it has a lot of meaning to me, being Northern England. And in this story, we meet this child, and her name is, she starts out as Elizabeth Ann, but they changed her name to Betsy. But she's an orphan who lives in Chicago with her two aunts. This is called a family diagram, and I'll try to explain this to you. So here's Elizabeth Ann, or Betsy, and she lives with what she calls her two aunts, Harriet and Frances. Now, Elizabeth Ann, or Betsy, these are her mother and her father, and they have an ex because they died. So she was a very young child, and her parents died, and she was sent to live with her father's aunt. This is her Elizabeth Ann's father, and this would be Elizabeth Ann's grandmother and grandfather. And so she is sent to live with her father's aunt. This would be Elizabeth Ann's father's aunt, and her aunt's daughter, Frances. Now, we don't know a lot about Frances or Harriet or the family. One thing we know about them is they have no time for the Putneys. The Putneys are the family in Vermont that are somehow on the side of Elizabeth Ann's mother. Okay? And the Putneys will come in later to the story. Now, when Elizabeth Ann, when her parents died when she was a baby, although there were a lot of other aunts and uncles in the family that I don't have on this family diagram, Aunt Harriet and Frances, they rushed in upon the little baby orphan, taking her home and surrounding her with the most loving devotion. They said to themselves that it was their manifest duty to save the dear little thing from other relatives who have no idea how to bring up a sensitive, impressionable child. And they were sure from the way that Elizabeth Ann looked at 6 months that she was going to be a sensitive and impressionable child. So projected onto this baby is sensitivity and some anxiety, I would say, from the aunts, from Aunt Frances and what's called Aunt Harriet. And so Aunt Frances and Aunt Harriet and Elizabeth Ann, they form a family. And Elizabeth Ann is described as an oversensitive child, small for her age, with a pale face, dark hair, with frightened and wistful expression. She is frail and sickly. It says that Aunt Frances loved the little girl with all her heart and longed above everything else in the world to protect her from all harm and to keep her happy and strong. If Elizabeth Ann was neither strong nor well, it was not due to lack of effort. Aunt Frances said that she and the girl were just inseparable. She shared in everything that Elizabeth Ann thought or did. She said she thought she ought to share all the girl's thoughts because she was determined that she would thoroughly understand Elizabeth Ann down to the bottom of her heart. Because Aunt Frances, who is Aunt Harriet's daughter, did not feel understood as a child. So Aunt Frances got into this little girl's heads and thoughts and feelings. Well, it happens that one time the doctor is called about Elizabeth Ann's frail health. Apparently she had a dream and Frances calls the doctor. And the doctor surprises Aunt Frances by pronouncing the child as healthy. But he notices that Harriet has a cough that needs attention. I think it ends up being TB, and of course that's contagious. So Elizabeth Ann can no longer live with Aunt Harriet, and Frances has to take care of her mother, Aunt Harriet. So Elizabeth Ann is put on a train to go to the dreaded Putneys on a farm in in Vermont. And according to Aunt Harriet, she doesn't want to send her there. She doesn't have a choice, but the Putneys have no sympathy for children. For Elizabeth Ann, this of course is a huge transition, but it produces some interesting changes in her because the farm family's understanding of children is really quite different from the city aunts. So this is after Elizabeth Ann gets off the train. This is her uncle, great uncle Harry. And you can see that in this, I'll read this. So she looked up at Uncle Harry with wide eyes of nervous terror because he had asked her to drive the cart. And she was hoping that he would hear and listen all about her terror that was within her. But Uncle Harry looked down at her soberly, his hard, weather-beaten face unmoved. Here, will you drive a piece? Here, you drive, will you, for a piece? He put the reins in her hands, hooked his spectacles over his ears, drew out a stubby pencil and bit of paper saying, I've got some figuring to do. You pull on the left-hand rein to make them go left, the other, or the other way, and 'tain't likely will meet any teens. So in Vermont, Betsy gets a lot less of those sympathetic responses from the adults around her. And one day at school, she has a test. And before Aunt Frances has always consoled her on test days because tests are horrible and they cause all kinds of symptoms and ills. And when Betsy tells her cousin Ann Putney about the test, her cousin Ann just doesn't appear that interested in it. And Betsy says to her cousin Ann, "You know how perfectly awful examinations make you feel." "I know," said cousin Ann. Betsy attempts to go on and tell her how her heart pounds and her mouth gets dry and all the mistakes she makes. And then Ann asks Betsy, "Do you really want to tell me all this? Because if you don't really want to, I don't see that it's doing anyone any good." And then Betsy realizes she really doesn't want to tell cousin Ann about it. But she was doing it because she thought it was the thing to do that she had been learned from her Aunt Harriet and Aunt Frances. Now, as time goes on, Betsy starts to learn to think for herself. She learns to be resourceful, and the Putneys praise her when she demonstrates that. She has a few more adventures when she has to rely on her own creativity and wits to deal with what is going on around her. And I just love this idea that the Putneys live by this principle, that a child will grow when she is challenged. And they provide for Betsy's real needs, like pulling a cape out of the wagon when she gets off the train so she's warm. They provide her with fun and joy. During that conversation that Ann has with her cousin about the exam, it takes place in a sugar house when they're about to make maple syrup. And her cousin says to her, "Why don't you take the boiling maple syrup out to the snow and it'll get hard and turn into candy?" So the Putneys don't seek to understand all of Betsy's thoughts and feelings. I just don't think they're that interested in getting to the bottom of the mind of Elizabeth Ann, who is now called Betsy. And they don't also live by the belief that she needs to be totally understood. They live by the principle that children need opportunities to grow and learn. Now, I don't know if I'm right about this, but I kind of make an analogy between family systems theory and the philosophy of the Putneys. Family systems theory is a way of looking at congregations and relationships and our families from our strengths, thinking about what strengths we have to respond to challenges. Many years ago, I did a presentation for clergy in Vermont, and the clergy that were there listening to my presentation about family systems was that they thought that family systems looking at a congregation meant that one did not care about people in the congregation. And I don't think that's true. But I can understand how people could think that, because it's kind of similar to how Aunt Harriet and Aunt Frances thought about the Putneys. So I will not be talking about all these 8 concepts, at least today. I will be coming to most of the workshop, and the one thing I love to talk about is family systems. So if anybody ever wants to ask me questions when I'm at the workshops or talk some more about it, I'm just happy to talk about it. But these are the 8 concepts of Bowen theory, and I just share them with you, and they're on the paper, so you'll have them to take home, because I kind of see today as a taster. If you are interested in this theory and this lens to look at congregations, I think you need to do some deeper study. But one of the interesting things about, I think, and I was reading a book and I was persuaded by this, that we are all theorists. Meaning that we all have a statement in our mind about how things work, even if we are unaware of it in how we relate to others. Think about how Aunt Frances thought about parenting compared to the Putneys. They both kind of came at it with different theories, even if those theories were kind of unconscious and not so aware. I mean, we learn as young children what behavior on our part will get what we want. We learn how to behave to get other people's approvals. And those early beliefs are still embedded in our brain. And a lot of them continue to influence our basic views of people and how we interact with others. So family systems theory provides a way of understanding human, emotional, and relational functioning. It's not an exact science, but it does look at the natural systems in the world to think about functioning and relationships and behavior. It even looks at the behavior in other species, like I talked about the lions and the hunt, and be more aware of failure and negative consequences. It looks at brain development. It's a way to observe people's interactions and what gets passed down in families, especially the way that families deal with trauma, loss, and tragedy. There's a myriad of relationships that arise in the church. I happen to be working in a very small church, what they would call a family-sized church. And it's amazing all the people that are related to one another, and I keep learning that. So I'm a little more thoughtful about that. But that's a very different relationship in some ways than a very large church where people are not related. They don't have kind of long-standing interactions with each other that go back decades. So what I want to try to share with you today is some guidelines for looking at relationships, guidelines for functioning in relationships, a way of observing what might be happening in relationships so that we can manage ourselves in those relationships, and to figure out maybe how relationships work and don't work. Ron Richardson, who is he was a pastoral counselor and he was a pastor before that, and he's written a lot of books on family systems. He said there's one primary fact that makes all churches alike, and it's death. And that probably sounds pretty simple, but I think it's also kind of deep. And I have 4 books kind of about family systems, and these are kind of extra books that I have in my house that you are welcome to sign out during the workshop. They're over there on the stage, and if you have any questions about them, one by Ron Richardson is actually about all the books that Jane Austen wrote, because he thinks Jane Austen had a lot of principles and talked about building character, and so he wrote a book about family systems and Jane Austen, which is really interesting. So you're welcome to take any of them out. So since this is the first topic on the agenda of where we're going this year, I want to go back to what I said about an attitude and posture that we have, so we can find a space for the Holy Spirit to blow through. Family systems theory, as I said, asks us to think about our own functioning in our families, in our work environment, and in our congregation. And I think this workshop, Creating and Leading Congregations in the 21st Century, demands an awareness of our own functioning in relation to one another, our congregation, our community, so we can get a better handle on what is happening around us. This is one lens to look at it. So how I think this is related to leading a church in the 21st century, when there are so many changes and challenges occurring in society which influence the church. I think with a focus on strength, thinking about how we respond to challenge and how we want to respond to challenge, with an awareness of how we function, how our congregations function. That will all be factors that will assist us in responding to change and loss and challenge this year and in years to come. I hope that you all know that after the first year of workshops, you will be participating in a very extensive congregational assessment tool called the CAT. And if you've ever looked online at this at Holy Cow Consulting, you see how extensive it is and all the information that you will get back about your congregation after you take the CAT. And what this tool attempts to get at is looking honestly and realistically at what is going on in your congregation, so you can discern how God is calling you at this time. There's always discerning going on in congregations. What is God calling us to be at this time and in this context? So through your participation in the workshops, one of the tools I'm hoping you will gain is the tool of observation, which I think has to do with being awakened and aware of God's presence in the world, kind of like the adventure of Advent, that awakening and awareness. Are there questions at this time from anybody, or should I keep going?
Keep going.
Keep going.
So God gives humans the ability to reflect upon what is happening in our lives. And I also believe that theories, lenses to look at congregations like family systems help us do that too. Recall the story in 2 Samuel when David takes Bathsheba to bed and then sends her husband to the front lines to be killed because she gets pregnant. God is not happy about this and sends the prophet Nathan to David and of course tells him a story about a rich man and a poor man. And the poor man has a lamb and he loves and he treats this lamb as one of the family. And the rich man wants the lamb and he steals it from the poor man and he eats it. So David hears the story and he explodes with anger, saying that the rich man has to pay for what he has done. And in the King James it says, "Thou art the man." So David, through kind of overhearing the story, getting a little bit apart from what's going on in his life, heard this from Nathan and was able to think about what he had done, do some reflection. It is with some distance, engaging with life in a little bit different way, with a little bit different perspective or lens, hearing it from a different angle, that we can gain insights on what is really going on, what God wants for us, and who God calls us to be. One of the cornerstones of this theory is self-differentiation. Some people know that term, and I'll define it. In the story about Betsy, I think she shows some self-differentiation at the Putneys when she takes responsibility for herself and she grows with her ability to be in challenging situations. So every one of us, according to the theory, we have a certain level of self-differentiation. Janine explains it a bit. Well, I think inherent in this construct of self-differentiation is two things: clarity and maturity. Clarity is being clear about what we think and believe, what we value, being clear about what we stand for, knowing what our roles and responsibilities are and not taking on others. With more clarity about ourselves comes also the ability not to be so persuaded by others' thoughts and feelings. So what other people think and feel is their thinking and feeling. And we might be able to reflect upon it and say, oh, I think that too. But we don't have to automatically go there and feel what they feel and think what they think. In having clarity, we are also clear about our principles and our intentions, so we don't get so swayed or persuaded by others as much. Last month, I was at a workshop about family systems, and one of the deans of the seminary named Israel Galindo, and he's the author of one of the books over there. He told the story of early in his career, he was the principal of a private school. And he had one kind of principle he lived by, which was when irate parents came to see him, not even irate, but any parent came to see him, he would act in a way that the parents would feel respected and that he would hear them out. So he would respect parents and he would hear them out, even if he didn't agree with them. And he told about a time when a mob of parents came to see him about something that they were all angry about. He said, well, he wouldn't see the whole mob, but he would see them, he would see a couple one at a time. And after about 3 sets of parents came to see him, the mob disbanded because the 3 parents told the other parents that they had been heard, and the mob disbanded. And I think that that's a really fascinating story about what can happen in a system, in an organization, when there's anxiety, when there's upsetness, when you are clear and you have clear intentions. The other part of self-differentiation is maturity. What is our ability to respond to life? What is our capacity to be flexible in our responses? To respond rather than react. In the story Understood Betsy, at the end of the book, she gets in trouble when she goes to a fair. The neighbor of the Putneys was supposed to take her and a young friend home from the fair, but they leave early, thinking that Betsy and her friend could get a ride home with another neighbor that was at the fair, but they also left early. So Betsy worked it out that she went to work at the fair for an hour, so she had enough money for her and her little friend to ride the train home. And she remembered in the past, she probably would have cried about it and felt sick, but now she was able to think through a challenge. So she grew in her maturity. Our ability to be clear about what we believe and what we know, to have the competency to respond to life with flexibility and grace, depends on many factors that influence our capability to function in a self-differentiated way, or a more self-differentiated way. It is said in the theory that we are all on a scale of self-differentiation. Apparently nobody gets more than 70. Those that are higher on the scale tend to be quite goal-directed and principle-oriented people. They are sure about their beliefs and convictions, but they're not dogmatic. They're not too rigid in their thinking. They may reconsider a position if they get new evidence. They can hear others and evaluate viewpoints. They can discard old beliefs in favor of new ones when it makes sense. They are pretty secure within themselves and their functioning, and they're not too affected by either criticism or praise from others. They can respect the self and identity of other people, and they don't become too critical or emotionally involved in trying to modify the life course of another. They respect that. They assume responsibility for self, are sure of what their responsibilities are and what their responsibilities are not. A little bit lower on the scale of differentiation, the more people hold on to rigid ideas, fixed cultural or political values. They tend to make a federal case out of it when they're rejected or they don't receive love from others. If they perceive something that is not just to them or unfair, they demand a lot of recompense for their hurts. A lot of times they blame others for their lack of happiness. They blame others when it is their responsibility. Sometimes people speak of times of self-differentiation, like that time when Betsy was at the fair. I would say that was really a time when she showed a lot of self-differentiation and maturity. I think it's hard for us to figure out where we are on the scale, and I don't think, according to the theory, we're so much supposed to do that. They say we marry a person that is on the same level of the scale of self-differentiation that we're at, and sometimes people hate to hear that. There's also two things. They talk about the basic level of self-differentiation. I put myself pretty low on the scale, but functioning-wise, I think I function up. So there's maybe a basic level, but you can function up on the scale also. There's a story that I love to tell, and if people were involved 10 years ago, they would have heard this one. But there's a parenting guru named Jim Fay, who I follow because he had a lot to do with attachment. And I'm an adoptive parent, and now I'm parenting a grandchild. So there's this story. Here's a picture of a dad and a kid shopping. And so Jim Fay tells a story about when he was at a grocery store on a Saturday morning. Grocery store like Market Basket. Have you ever been to Market Basket in Concord and maybe other places? It's like chock-a-block. There's like so many people on the aisles, and some of the aisles are pretty small. So it's packed. And so Jim was walking down one of the aisles, and he heard this baby crying. And then he heard the father of the baby saying, "Now, Arthur, calm down. We can do this. We have a full shopping list, but we'll get it done." A little bit later on, a couple more aisles later, the baby's still crying. And Jim Fay hears this father saying, "Arthur, now we're halfway done our shopping. Soon we'll be done." A little while later, the baby's still crying. And he hears the father saying, "Now, Arthur, we're almost done. When we're done, we can get a cool cone of ice cream, and it will be all fine." And the baby cries through the cashier and everything. And Jim Fay has to go back to this dad and say, "You know, what do you do for a living? You were kind of so calm in talking to Arthur." And the dad said, "Well, I'm a school principal, but I need to tell you that I'm Arthur."
Rebecca,
Yeah.
as I see what you're saying here and see the stuff on the screen, I think it would help to distinguish, to define the word anxiety as it's found in family systems rather than anxiety as means. Because I got lost on the way here and I was anxious that I would be late, and that's not the kind of anxiety that family systems talk about. Can you make that distinction?
I can go to anxiety, and I'm going to do that. Is this making me anxious?
Be anxious for you?
Yeah. You don't have to be anxious for me. I'm anxious enough. But, I gotta show this one. So,
Oh yeah, that's a funny scene.
so anxiety in Bowen theory is actually life. We're all anxious. We all have a level of anxiety in life. So to live, to survive, we need anxiety kind of to survive. Now, bone theory is actually, it says a lot about anxiety. And it talks about two kinds of anxieties. And one would have been, David, what you experienced in coming here, and you got lost, so did Gail, is that of acute anxiety, an immediate perceived threat, which may be real or imagined. In this case, it was real. They got lost. Oh, I'm going to be late. What am I going to do? I'm going to walk in. It's already started. That's acute anxiety. Then there's also chronic anxiety, which is kind of what's going on in the background, kind of a perceived threat. It's less likely to be real, but it can happen in churches when maybe long ago in history, something happened. Did the pastor have misconduct? Was there sexual misconduct, or was there misconduct with the money? And that kind of chronic anxiety might continue through the church system. And people probably are not even aware of it, but it might come out that people, you know, are more reactive about money. Now, we're all reactive about money in churches, but like maybe even more so. They just there's might be more polarization. You might see some more very emotional, what we call reactivity in a church when there's a high level of chronic anxiety. Do you want to add anything, David, or do you have, I mean, I know you know some
The
of
way that
this.
helps me think about it is that anxiety of being late or whatever has to do with an incident.
Right,
The anxiety that I think Family Systems talks about has to do with the context. It's the space that we're in rather than the incident that happened. That's what
oh,
helps me.
that's how you look at it? That's interesting. So the space we're
So
in.
that, you know, an anxious context is, you know, sort of the history of the family, the history of the church,
Right.
the dynamics that are involved, and whether things are balanced or whether they're brittle or all of that.
Yeah, that makes sense. So in the context, if things are kind of more rigid, as you say, more brittle, people are more reactive, there's more chronic anxiety because of whatever history has gone on, whatever it has been passed down that is kind of still within people. Yeah, Holly.
So these days with churches, if one of the challenges is the anxiety that comes up when there's the idea that perhaps we need to change a little bit, like, well, whatever it is. But the moment you say, we're going to change this, or we need to change, that word change, is that wrapped up in chronic anxiety?
It is wrapped up in chronic anxiety, because it would be really interesting to go back in a church and say, okay, how did change happen? You know, when did change happen? Was it only when it was really a desperate time? Was there any time when change came when it wasn't so desperate? Was the Holy Spirit involved? Who was involved? Who were the naysayers? Who were the positives? You know, where were people kind of situated? You know, was it always the pastor's idea instead of lay people? Or was it one committee that always kept it, you know, kept back the idea? It's interesting to go back in the history and look at how change did happen and how we responded to change in a congregation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Related to that, isn't, I mean, sometimes you see that even when change happens, and even when it's good, the system will do everything it can to bring it back.
Right, the change back then.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. There's always, a church has a certain kind of what they call homeostasis they talk about. And if there's change, there will be people that kind of like, they call it sabotage or change back. But sometimes it's a particular function in a congregation that will do that, or a particular person that will do that. But you always have to expect it. You just always have to expect it. And then the question is, how do we respond to that? Do we respond by going haywire to, oh, I can't believe this happened again. You know, here they are, you know, they're trying to keep us from going forward. You know, or do you say, okay, we expected this. This is how we're going to address this. I have some ideas. You know, this is really important. This is a principle. We want to stick by our principles. What are they, and how can we address them to continue to walk forward, respecting the, you know, change fast, respecting that, people don't want to change, but, to address that. And I said, as I said, there's no easy, I don't have the answer for your congregation. I think each context has its own strengths and resiliencies that it can look to when it's in that position.
Is chronic anxiety also fueled by the fear that what happened in the past that was negative can happen again?
Right, and it probably isn't even conscious. That's why sometimes they talk about, is it after pastor? When a pastor comes in after there's been some kind of misconduct, and sometimes a lot of scapegoating can go on that pastor, even though that pastor might be a person of great integrity and grace, but because of what happened, there's like, you're a little itchy,
So a second question is, like I can see in my congregation that the few people that do live with chronic anxiety, and I think that they bring chronic anxiety to the congregation, which most of the people are not living like that. And I've seen that in the past, it's thwarted doing, even just putting in a thermostat in the wall. I'm not kidding.
People hear that, poor Holly can't even put a thermostat in the wall.
Oh,
of
it
the
got
church
done,
now.
but I'm just saying that there are some people in the congregation, and maybe you all experience this too, who slow down any changes because of their own personal. So my question more or less is, sometimes, my observation is not all congregations suffer from this chronic anxiety, but there's certain people within it that kind of hold the congregation hostage because of their own anxiety. And the good news is that there are people in the congregation now that won't allow this anxiety to keep holding us back.
That's excellent. Holly said there's some people, she notices in her congregation, that have a lot of anxiety and tend to hold things back, but the congregation is not allowing that now. And that's absolutely true. Sometimes there's people, because of their family situations, they are very rigid. It can be a whole church or organization, but it can also be individuals. But the thing about self-differentiation, what they say is if there are enough people who are acting in a self-differentiated manner, they can hold those other people kind of to account. The more you can act with principles and intentions and goals and in a mature and clear manner, that can help the system function in a healthier way. Yes.
How do you share with folks like the ability to have a non-anxious presence? You know what I mean? Because I feel like that can be so helpful, just to like be able to hold the anxiety at bay a little bit and look at it.
So Kate asks, how do you help other people be a non-anxious presence?
Or like share that experience.
Share the experience of non-anxious presence. I'll tell you what the theory says. That the way a non-anxious presence is not exactly bone theory, but to be self-differentiated. I'll say that. How can you help other people be more self-differentiated? The theory says that if we are self-differentiated and we act functionally in a self-differentiated manner, it will affect the system. Okay. We cannot will other people to be non-anxious. We can't do that. And if we do, then we are not being centered. We are not being self-differentiated. As much as we want to do that, I mean, sometimes we just want to will it, and we think we can talk somebody into something, or and it's not that we want to encourage and challenge other people to be healthy and to be more mature and to be clear and to ask questions about that. So I guess the one way to encourage and challenge would be to ask questions, to ask some thoughtful questions to people, and that might actually help you be more calm. Sometimes it helps me be more calm when I'm getting curious. I raised adopted children, and it was very, very hard, and lots of people know my story. But they were older when they came. They were Russian, and they were older. They were 8, 10, and 11. So I went to more parenting classes than anybody should. But this one wonderful gentleman named Dan Hughes, he taught us this thing. And he said it was about relationships with our adopted children. But he said, you know, it could be any relationships. And I think he's right. And it was called Place. And it was playful, loving, empathic, no, playful, loving, accepting, curious, and empathic. And I think if you can be principled in your interactions with other people being loving, playful, loving, accepting, curious, and empathic, I think it goes a long way.
Is that acronym somewhere in here?
No, I didn't put place in there. No, I figured everybody had heard it because I've mentioned it so many times.
I was just gonna say, the way I think of it is that anxiety is contagious,
Absolutely.
but
yeah.
calmness is also contagious.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't have it with me, but I did a presentation on understanding, and I had the picture of two babies, and like one was crying and the other one was like putting her hand on the baby's shoulder, and I think it was like to calm her down, because I think probably she was picking up on that, the one baby was picking up on it, because we do have these mirror kind of neurons that go back and forth that can make us more anxious or make us more calm. Yeah.
Could you repeat those again? P-L-A-C-E,
P-L-A-C-E, playful,
playful,
loving, accepting, curious, empathic. I would probably say compassion, but
thank you.
yeah. This is what I was saying from Ron Richardson. If one or more people can function in a more self-differentiated way, it can modify relationships in the family or in the congregation. All right, I want to go on to another construct in the theory, which is triangles. And I'm going to try something that I've never tried before, but I would like if two people come up to sit in chairs up here. And you don't have to do anything except sit in chairs, and I'll tell you exactly what you have to do, and talk to one another about one another. Only talk about like yourselves. Anybody willing to come up and try that?
Looking at me.
David and Roberta. I knew it would be you two. I knew it. And I know you know each other because David's a pastor at South Newbury and Roberta's a parishioner. So when you come up, just
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Sorry.
if you'd sit in the chairs and just talk to each other about each other and only about each other.
Like me talk about me?
Yeah, well, you can talk about, no, you talk about Roberta,
Okay.
and but you can't bring in any other like idea or other person, or just talk amongst yourselves about each other, but no extra idea or anything.
So how's things going with the house decision? Did I need to bring you to tears?
Okay, you just brought in another concept, the house.
Oh,
I don't understand.
You don't
that.
David is one of the most faithful people I've ever known. Is that the kind of thing?
Yeah, you can do that, yeah.
You really are, David.
well, Roberta is one of the most grounded people I've ever known.
I enjoy the relationship that we have, not only as minister, but as my friend.
Roberta knows how to navigate through difficult times and find grace in the midst of struggle.
It's been. He's so flexible.
Who, me?
Yeah,
Flexible?
yeah.
I'm flexible?
Okay, no.
Well, there's a few
But
joints that
you-
are less and less flexible at my age.
When something is not going according to plan, when some little glitch presents itself or whatever, you're able to go to see through, it's going this way and it's going this way, and we wanted to really go that way. I think that you're able to handle that. Help people understand that, and not that it's your idea, but to understand the implications that I'm getting too
I'm getting too complimented. Well, and when you found yourself in a situation where circumstances forced you to make some decisions that you didn't want to make, you sat with the grief of that. You were able to not jump to some place that you weren't, but you were also able to find a way to turn that into something that was a positive outcome for you and for people around you. So, you know, that's something that I've seen about you that I find admirable. Okay, there's enough of this.
Okay, no, okay, all right, now, are you getting a little anxious? Yeah, okay, now, you know, I think it would have been interesting if you didn't know each other, because you guys were able, you know, a lot of that. But I bring up this and did this because this is two people, right? So this is a dyad. And my argument and the theory says that a dyad people is not relationship is a triangle. It's three people. That's much less anxious than a two-person relationship. And if I would have allowed you to bring in other people or to talk about the church or to bring in like another construct, I think it would have been much less
All right.
anxiety provoking and more stable. Does that make sense?
Sure, because
I'm
even
not
talking about her house and the fact that. her house
Exactly. I
is
said, are
busy,
you bringing in a third
now we're
thing?
talking about that rather
Yeah.
than about you.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, we can go back. Thanks. So that's what I was trying to use that to get at. I'm not sure how I did, but without bringing in a third person or idea or construct, it gets a little anxiety provoking. Because when the emotional tension between two people in a two-person system exceeds a certain level, it will triangle in a third person, permitting the tension to kind of go between three people within, so you got a triangle. So the theory would say that in families, in churches, everywhere, there are multiple and interlocking triangles between members, but there are also ideas and situations and fantasies which come up in this also.
Rebecca, can we take a break within the next 4 minutes or so I can change tapes?
Absolutely. Why don't we take a break right now as we're going into triangles, and so 5 minutes.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so here starts the basic of relationships is triangles, and triangles have some rules. Triangles are between people. As I said, they are in families, they are in organizations, so they're the people in the organizations. They also, I do use triangles with like mental constructs, I mean with issues and situations. I do that too. So there are lines between people in the triangles. And this will be the relationship between the people. And this can be a rigid kind of relationship, or it can be a little bit flexible. So some of the relationships between people, of course, are conflictual or close, can be calm, can be distant, can be cut off, it can be closer than close, and that would be called fusion. And here are some common triangles in families, like two spouses and a son or daughter that can be called actually the monster triangle that we're all in. And sometimes you'll think, oh, this isn't a triangle. There are always triangles, but sometimes if the relationship is pretty calm, you kind of won't notice it. So another one pretty common, wife, son, daughter-in-law. Say maybe wife, daughter, daughter-in-law, but spouse and a spouse, and then an issue, whether it's money or alcohol or sex. Those are common triangles in the family.
I mean, the third piece of the triangle is a thing.
Is a thing, an issue, a thing. Yeah, sometimes that's called a mental construct.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
Are you explaining that these exist, or are you explaining that these are good?
They exist. They're not good, bad, they exist.
I guess I'm thinking about the concept of triangulating conversation. Like I have a problem with you, and I talk to you about the problem, will you tell her, and who goes, well, you know, people are saying such and such. That I don't think that's a healthy thing.
Triangulation generally is not a healthy thing. If you would be talking to me about Roberta.
Right.
Or gossiping. But I mean, sometimes it's not healthy or unhealthy. It just actually just is. We just do it as people.
But isn't
Yeah.
it, Rebecca?
Yeah.
So actually, when I teach this, I typically, I mean, I get what you're saying, that a diet needs, like a three-legged milk stool stands better than
Exactly.
trying to prop up on two legs. I got
Right.
that. But typically in church family systems, like if you think about like Friedman and some of the others, they're very clear to talk about triangulation is typically never a good way to approach something. A dyad actually is a better situation because in working with the system, you're trying to keep people being direct and working together with one another rather than dragging a third party in, even for good or evil purposes, whatever you want to call it. So I'm a little struggling here with the way that you're presenting this, because typically, again, triangulation is not a good thing. And it's one of the most difficult pieces to try to break out of in a church system, teaching folks to work with source, stay together with it, stay in a dyad, don't go to a triangle.
Okay, I'm gonna, in the theory, triangles just are.
Right,
They
sure.
always exist. Okay,
Sure.
so when you're talking about triangulation, saying, okay, you got, I'm gonna go A, B, C, okay? And B comes to you wanting to talk about C, okay? So you'd call that triangulation, right? And so what would A do? A, it kind of, if you wanted to have a more flexible triangle, you know, A would say to B, hey, you know what, don't tell me, go talk to C. Exactly.
That's
So, yeah, no, that's not a dyad. You're still in a triangle, but you are encouraging them to go back to develop this relationship and this line.
In a triangle, you're not being triangulated.
Right.
That's
So
right.
it's different between triangle and triangulation. Yes.
That's it. You're encouraging staying in the two systems rather than triangle.
But an example of where triangulation can be healthy is if you, in one theory of development, Margaret Muller, the mother and the infant at the beginning, the human infant hasn't been born psychologically. It's in what she calls a symbiotic relationship with the mother. Probably better to call it parasitic. But, she calls it symbiotic. And then when the father comes into the picture, there's a triangle formed there that pulls the infant out of that helps the infant to self-differentiate. And that's an extremely healthy, essential aspect of human interaction.
Right. The fact that there is like two parents and a child, that's that can be a healthy interaction.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, triangles, they just are. I mean, we've got a trinity.
Right.
You know, I think they're just in nature, and they're just they just are. They're not good or bad, but I mean, there are times when they get rigid you know, when someone talks about someone else, when there's severe gossiping, when there's severe criticizing, all that, even in families, even between mother and father and child. I mean, there are some triangles that are not healthy. I speak about one in my family where, say this is me, my mother and father, my mother used me as a confidant. That was not exactly a healthy thing to do. My mom should have been going to my dad, talking to him about this, but instead I was her confidant. That wasn't the most healthy thing in my childhood growing up, and something that I had to work hard in therapy.
And our focus is church systems and understanding this through the family system model. I understand that. And typically, though, we're already working with systems that are already happening. So understanding them is one thing, but more common than not isn't the healthy triangle, it's the unhealthy triangle. So trying to navigate and understand and work in that system, encouraging the more stable relationships. So I guess, I mean, I totally agree with some of these other pieces, but in the focus that we're in, I feel like there's a mixed message.
I think even there though, I mean, the example you used of A going to C to talk about B, they may need that support of C in order to go back to B.
I hear you.
So again, you're needing the triangulation in order to resolve the problem. It's not in itself healthy or unhealthy. And it's not primarily one or the other, but in many cases, it's not whether it's good or bad, it's how you're going to use it.
So when you map it though in family systems, you're very clear, like when you have the situation and the people and you're mapping it out, you would show this as a broken place and the triangulation itself. When you're marking, when you're showing those relationship patterns, you're actually wanting to point out that the triangle itself is lending itself towards the dyad. I mean, that's the way I thought it. So I know that sounds like it's different, but.
Yeah. I'm going to think about what you're saying.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you can have a healthy triangle.
Mhm.
Right? So
You can have healthy relationships. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we know there are healthy relationships and not so healthy relationships.
So it doesn't always have to bring dyads.
I mean, you probably, like, if you're talking to somebody, you probably say, like, if I'm talking about Holly, I probably think, oh, there's no triangle here. But the theory would say there is a triangle. I don't know what it would be. I mean, it might be, like, we were talking about what was the New Hampshire School of Ministry. So I would say that there's the triangle. We were talking about Byron Jones, another, triangle. Yeah, David.
Oh, yeah, actually, the person. in front of me
Okay.
first.
Sorry.
I don't have any, this is all brand new to me, but just from my observation with the conversation in front, I naturally wanted to go for that third thing. And so when I read about the kind of, this part of the theory, I automatically thought of a person, but when a separate thing came in, suddenly it was like the anxiety between two people, focusing on each other, and the need to bring in that third thing makes them feel more comfortable, and that it's just what relationships do. And so suddenly it just kind of clicked. This is just the way people come together, and sometimes it can go bad, sometimes it can be beneficial, but it's just what we naturally do as thinking individuals. So I'm seeing it from that perspective.
Yeah, I was going to put it in a kind of a church situation.
Yeah.
So I think frequently a pastor and a president of a church council or whatever are in a triangle relationship with the church council.
Oh, right.
Okay.
Like the moderator,
The
church
moderator,
council,
the pastor, the church council. So that can be a healthy triangle if there's an interaction between the pastor and the moderator or president or whatever that's looking at how to increase the effectiveness of the church council. It becomes triangulated if the pastor and the church and the president start grouching about those people on the church council. And well, I don't know why they aren't doing their job and they just show up at meetings and that's all they want to do and then they want to go home. Now you've triangulated, and what's happened is the anxiety between the pastor and the church council president has decreased because what you've done is you've created a fusion, a bond, us against them. And so the triangle exists one way or the other. The question is whether it's functioning in a way that's empowering or in a way that's enmeshing. Is that
So I want to dovetail on something that you said about the dyad, because yes, when you have the triangle and you have the unhealthy triangulation, like I can see why you keep calling it it goes back to a dyad, because two people still have to communicate with each other, but then it makes the triangle healthy when the two people that need to be speaking to each other, so they have the dyad, but they're still in this triangle because this one other person was brought into it who may pull themselves away from the dysfunction, but they're still part of that triangle because the triangle was these three people in the beginning. Is that sort of what you're trying to say? She's trying to say at the same time?
I think we have different ways of looking at
Yeah,
it.
and I think we're all saying
But
the
it's
same.
basically,
the same
okay, I
piece.
just wanted to make sure I fully understood.
And I just wanted to lift up something you said briefly, is sometimes you don't know what that third thing is. So I find sometimes if I'm having a conversation with someone and they're reacting in a way that I'm not expecting, it might mean that there's a third thing that I don't know about.
Right. It's probably
Ah,
something
that's a
in their
good point.
family, might be a relationship with
Exactly.
their family. You have
Something that
no
has
idea.
nothing to do with you.
Right.
Right.
Yes, so one of the rules about triangles, like, is it Janai? Like Janai said, is one of the rules is it's really important for you to be in relationship with other people in the triangle and not this, not being that. And one of the basic triangles I was taught about was, let's say, pastor, congregation, and church. And church is like what I want the church to be, what I think it is, what I hope for it. So it's a pastor's job to be in good relationship with the congregation. It's a pastor's job, I think, and responsibility to be clear about what they think and hope for church. But if they get into this line, if they try to will the congregation about what the church should be, what they hope it will be, if they will the congregation to think something about church instead of encouraging and challenging the congregation to get clear about what they think about church, that pastor's going to be in big trouble. They're going to invite all kinds of stress.
That is awesome.
Okay, so here's, I would say, when Elizabeth Ann was little, this was her monster triangle between her and her two aunts. And I drew this line because this was very close, and this was kind of Frances moving toward Elizabeth Ann, and I would also say probably Frances was kind of fused with Elizabeth Ann because she tried to get into her feelings and her thoughts, because I would say that was probably a fused relationship. And so in our families, we have all kinds of triangles between us and parents, us and grandparents. There's just multiple triangles. We go to the rules, if I missed any of the rules. Oh, so here are what I thought were some common triangles in churches.
This is why I don't have my spouse at my church. He can just stay at his own church.
Understand.
Keep out of it, buddy.
Can you explain some of those?
Explain some of the triangles. Well, often there can be a triangulation between a pastor's partner, and a congregational member, or a congregational committee, or the congregation. So I can tell you when I was a pastor's spouse, I was not a pastor, and my husband was a Baptist pastor. And a congregation member called about putting somebody on the prayer chain. And I don't remember what I said, but whatever I said did not make her happy. And so it went through the whole congregation that, you know, Rebecca said this about, you know, this particular prayer chain, and it really got my husband, and things got heated up. So triangles can get heated up, and I think these are some places where triangles can get heated up in relationships, in reactivity, and sometimes two people forming a bond and being very close, and someone else being on the out, like David was talking about, pastor and moderator and church council, where the pastor and moderator are gossiping about the church council and how awful they are.
The other part with the pastor's partner is that the congregational member may collude, like create an intimate relationship with the spouse to try to get information about the pastor.
That can happen too. All kinds
Yeah.
of things can happen.
Oh, yeah. And I've heard about that more than you have.
Yes.
One thing that I've always found really interesting is, let's say I'm A, and I have a very good friend who's B, right? I don't like C,
Yeah.
for whatever reasons, just I've never really liked that person,
Yep.
all right? But I really like B.
Right.
And now I learn, or I know that B likes C.
Uh-huh.
I can't understand that. I can't understand that, but it's a dynamic that happens all the time.
It does. Yeah. It just happens. And you can choose what to do with that. You don't have to like C if you don't want to, because B, like C, you could say, oh, is there anything, you know, good about C that maybe I could like, or maybe I don't need to, you know? But triangles get heated up if you would get really turned up about B liking C, like, I don't know how you can like that person. You know, I don't, it's, you know, and if you kind of got into their head and said, you shouldn't do it, or you shouldn't like them, then that triangle gets heated up. So you can only influence the side of the triangle that you are attached to. I said this about the pastor trying to will a congregation to think about what they think about church. If you try to will the other side of the triangle that you are not attached to, it will invite stress or anxiety. So we're always in triangles. Sometimes we don't see it when people are calm and there's not conflict or distance. The relationships in triangles generally shift. Some triangles are very rigid and fixed. This can especially be true in our monster triangle, like our relationship with our parents can be pretty rigid, that we have one relationship with one parent, a very different relationship with the other parent. There are generally two on the inside and one on the outside. This is especially true if relationships are intense, or if there's like a triangulation when you're gossiping about somebody, or, you know, talking about someone behind the back.
Rebecca, can I say something?
Yeah, absolutely.
You started off, and when you went through the hopes and expectations way at the beginning of your presentation, and you left one up there, right?
I did.
The joy of experimentation. Oftentimes, we get caught in the fear.
Right. Fear of failure, yeah.
And I noticed for myself, and I think a lot of us, even just paying attention to the triangle conversation here, right? We always want to be on the right side of the triangle. Like, we never want to be the one that is responsible for messing up the flow in the triangle. Notice, like there's a lot of fear of failure. And we say, well, the triangle is dysfunctioning, but I'm not part of the dysfunction.
Like when we see ourselves outside of it.
Yes, and I think it's helpful, like, when we just part of this process, part of this learning process, part of this being part of it process is being able to have that objective analysis. To be able to say, you know what, maybe as pastor, I'll use myself as pastor, I can see how oftentimes I try to influence the congregation and the church. And just being able to recognize when we do that and take some of the grace that God has for us and apply it to ourselves.
But
Like, you know, wow, I am sticking, I am creating bad energy in the triangle. Okay, I can get out of that. Like, it's not irreparable, it can shift, I can be forgiving of myself.
Like you mean bad energy, like you're trying to
Like
affect the side of the
that's
triangle
correct.
that you're not.
I'm trying to fixate angles that aren't mine to be aligned.
because that begs the question too, David, of when is a leader being helpful in bringing something to the congregation?
Yeah.
And I mean, that's the tension that we always hold. When am I manipulating and when am I leading?
And I think what I'm trying to say is, yeah, we do both.
We do both.
For
And
both
sometimes
ends.
it's hard to know when we're challenging and encouraging versus manipulating. Yeah, David.
In the South, they used to say, you've gone from preaching to meddling.
That's a great line.
You went forward.
Oh, did I go forward a lot? Yeah. Okay. So I just want to show, this is a family. And Daniel is kind of the identified patient, they would call him. So he's the one kind of the family is based upon, and you can see the different relationships. So this is Daniel's youngest brother, and he has a very distant relationship with them. A distant relationship is just dotted lines. This is Daniel's mother, and he's quite fused with her. He's in a conflictual relationship with his father. Interesting to know what this relationship is. I can't probably not be that healthy. I think this means either alcohol or mental illness when half the square. Men in family diagrams, men are always squares, women are circles.
Well, maybe perhaps you should start out by letting people know that this is a geneagram, because not everybody knows.
I said family diagram.
Oh, family
Yes,
diagram.
family
Okay.
diagram. Yeah, sorry.
All right, sorry.
It's also called, can be called a genogram, yeah. So this family diagram about a family, and it shows the members in the family and some of their relationships. And one of the things is when we are, working with people, when we're talking with people, one of the things we never know often about people, I think it's hard to know people's motivations, what people are motivated by, or why they do what they do. But a lot of it probably has to do with what they learned in their family that we have no knowledge of. Like, I know, like, when I've met somebody and, like, they're really kind of rude to me and I'm being really kind, I'm like, what in the world is going on? It's probably something's going on in the family that I'm not even aware of, that they might not even be aware of.
So what are the symbols, the green line and the?
Yeah, so I don't know why they're different colors. So the green line means distant. So Daniel is distant from his youngest brother, Claude. He was born in 1974, and his brother, Jean-Claude, was born in 1980. He's distant from him. This one, he's in a conflict relationship with his father. This is his father. This is his mother.
So the squiggly lines are conflict?
Yeah, this is, squiggly lines are conflict. This means close, 2 lines is close.
And 3 lines
So,
mean enmeshed.
Fusion, enmeshed or fusion, so very, very close, like you think what they think, or they care about your feelings, they try to manipulate your feelings, or you're just very,
And then to the right, the red squiggly lines, is that really
that's conflict too. Yeah, I don't know why one's red and one's blue. Each kind of genogram place has kind of different colors.
Well, that particular genogram suggests that Daniel was adopted by Max and Nicole. See where it says to the left, Dan was
Oh,
adopted.
you're right, it
And
does.
so he's got a close enmeshed relationship with his dead mother. Because she's got an
You're
ex.
right, he does, right, she's dead,
So
you're
he's
right.
still deeply
That's right.
attached to someone who's dead. And
Right,
he's been adopted by someone because Andre is
that's right.
half there.
It is.
Whatever the half that's missing, I don't know. But, so he's been adopted by Max and Nicole,
Right,
and that's not working because he's still deeply attached to someone who's not available.
yeah, he's quite distant from his adopted family for whatever reason. I mean, we don't know the story, but must be complex. So I wanna, one more thing. I wanna go. All right. So I talked about the words, I think, emotional system, and bone theory looks at emotional system. And according to Ed Friedman, who some people have mentioned, he was kind of a Jewish rabbi who brought this theory into the church and congregations and synagogues. He said that this is what was the family emotional system. So as you can see, there's a lot to it, to a family emotional system. So when we're talking to anyone, they are bringing all this to the interaction and the conversation or whatever interaction we are with people. We are bringing the same thing to the relationship and the interaction. So there's a lot going on and a lot that we don't know about. Some people say that this is kind of the like if you see an iceberg and on the top of the iceberg are people's feelings, underneath the water, this is everything else that's going on with the person. And if you look at an iceberg, if you ever looked at it on top of the bottom of the water, underneath the water, it's huge, and on the top, it's just this little bird. So I'm gonna leave it here, and after lunch, Dave and I are gonna work on, I have a really, I think, a good video to show you about church life, and I'm gonna ask you to do a little exercise about it then, so maybe you can understand triangles and relationships a little bit more. And it's called The Little Table. I don't know if anyone has seen it, but we'll go for lunch now and come back. I think we'll come back around 12:45, so we'll come back in 30 minutes. So you can have 30 minutes for lunch.
And if anybody wants to walk or just bring their lunch, there's a market for Bolton's, right? It's within walking distance. You could go out of the church and make a right, head that direction. It's a great market, a big sandwiches. If you want to walk, it's a beautiful day. Get something to do there.
Well, what time do we have to be back by?
1:45. Well, they're up here if you want that.
While we're waiting on Jim.
I'm set.
Thank you.
I'm ready.
Great. My name is Dave Jabaki. I'm going to be leading, actually, I'll be with you all twice in November when we're looking at adaptive leadership in faith communities, and then again in June. If we can even believe that there will be a June, we have to go through the winter and all this. But we'll be looking at getting out of our boxes, creativity and innovation in the church. But for November, I'd like to give each of you all a project. So you've got some time, not a whole lot of time. Even though this is September, we're meeting the first Saturday in November. I think it's the 3rd.
Let Rebecca give you the mic while you're talking in order that it gets on. Thanks, David.
Yep. So this is what I am going to invite you all to do, is twofold. You're going to get together in your representative groups that you're with now from your congregation, and I like to be a little arts and crafty time sometimes. So I'm going to invite you to make a box. On the outside of your box, I'd like you to have something that represents your church, your context. That can be, I'm not even going to tell you what it can be, right? We're jumping ahead to June now. Be creative and out of the box, but we're going to put you in a box first. So make a box that represents your church. Then I'm going to ask you to select a number of challenges your church has faced in recent past. If you are the kind of person who needs a little more direction than that, I'm going to give you a number of between 3 and 5 challenges that your church has faced in the recent past. And I'd like you to, however you want to frame this, you can write it on an index card, you can write an essay, don't let your pastor do it, it'll be 25 minutes or more. But write what your challenge was and how you addressed it. And then lastly, what your role in that response was. Some of you may not have had a visible role in that response. Others of you may have had a visible role in that response. So you're going to create a box that's going to be representative of your church. Inside your box, you're going to have 3 to 5 challenges and how you responded to each of those and what your role was in.
So how far back are you saying
Yeah.
recent?
So,
You know, churches could be,
yeah, like, we're not talking about recent past, like 250 years ago. So, like, in the last 5 years, I think that's probably a reasonable number.
So how the church responded to it, or we personally?
How the church responded to the challenge, and then what role you played in that response.
Do we each make one of these boxes?
You're doing this as a group, as your church group.
Who's the one who's answering the how, what was my role?
Correct. Who's the one that's answering? It can be, that's for you all to,
Doesn't make any sense.
if you, how many of you from Long Meadow are there?
Today there's two.
But all together?
We don't know.
Okay. So it'd be good to have some clarity around, like, you know, I think part of the idea is you're forming groups and you're coming to this experience throughout this year as a group, right? So you might have 2 to 3 people. That's correct. My understanding of kind of the whole is that you're having some consistency across your experience of this CL21, because the topics that you're learning are actually designed to build upon each other, not in a linear way, but they are going to fold into each other. So the answer to your question, Ruth, is right now there's 2 of you. I would say that you guys come together. My hope is that you're having some conversation between now and November in your small context, and you're saying, here's the challenges that we faced. You might have insight into some of those challenges. Cindy might have a different, she may see a different challenge. That's all part of this process. This isn't some intentionality around the fact that too often we see the challenges in our church through one set of eyes, one lens.
Can I ask a question, like, in Ruth's situation, would Ruth also say, okay, me as pastor, this is how I responded, and would Cindy as an individual say, okay, I was in this role and this is how I responded?
Can we have
to it?
multiple answers? That was exactly my question.
You would have multiple answers. You might have faced a challenge. I'm going to pick something trivial, although it may not be trivial because Holly raised it earlier. We had a heating issue and wanted to install a thermostat. That was the challenge. The outcome, right? How we addressed that was, you know, we talked about it. People raised their concerns. We planned a meeting to discuss it. And then on Saturday, Pete came in and installed it before anyone knew about it. Maybe, or maybe not, right? And so then that's that third part is what those of you who are a part of this group. So the pastor may have had a different engagement in that. Cindy might have had a different engagement in that. Understand?
So you can put both.
Yep. So you're
That's my
putting your
question.
challenge, you're putting how that challenge was addressed or resolved, and then your roles in it. What I'm hoping that third part, that a lot of what Rebecca's talking about here, the system and our participation in that family system, will be informing your understanding of how you responded to it. Partly what we're trying to get at is these churches come up with solutions, we come up with responses, we address the challenge before us, and we're not always cognizant of all the different roles that we play. I'm just hearing some of the triangle conversation that we just had earlier, right? Sometimes we think that the solution was point A and point B, and we don't recognize that point C played a role in that. So I'm asking you all to be somewhat reflective of how the various roles that we had. Even if it seems like in this thermostat conversation, I'm one of the trustees, and I never did anything about it, right? I was at the meeting, but I didn't have any role in the thermostat getting installed. Perhaps as I sitting back and looking back on this, I realized that I did have a role in it because I never said anything about at the meeting about how I was feeling. So it may seem like I had no role, and yet when I look back on it, I had a role. We're not grading ourselves on this. This is just an exercise. I'm a pastor who struggles with perfection. Don't beat yourself up if you think you haven't done this exercise right. It's not about having the right outcome. It's about being part of the process. Okay.
Are we going to put our answers inside the box?
Yes. So you're going to come with a box that represents your church, and inside your box are the challenges that your church, just a couple of them, that your church has faced in the last 3 to 5 years. If you don't have more than 3 challenges that you faced in the last 3 to 5 years,
God bless you.
Great.
I believe you.
You are the kingdom of God.
or your head is in the sand, one or the other. Thank you.
And I will just underline that the purpose of homework was, or we built this into the class because we didn't want the class to be on Saturday and then 6 weeks later you deal with it again. We want to encourage you to begin to start grappling with some of this stuff. And as David said, none of it's going to be graded, none of it's going to be, returned to you with comments on it, but it's to give you the opportunity to grapple with some of the stuff. I wanted on this, up here is the description. I wanted to tell you that there are 2 dates that have had to change. We've tried to, but it's correct. It's correct on this. It's corrected here. The managing conflict was initially scheduled 2 weeks earlier, but is on March 30th. And we made a calendar mess up and put down creativity and innovation was on June 2nd, which is a Sunday. So it is correct. It is correct, right on this one for you. I think that's it. That's all that we need to say?
The one thing I want to share, I think it's been made clear that, like, as a presenter, if people have questions in the next 6 weeks, you're welcome to do they have a way to contact me, Gail, or will there be a contact page that goes out?
No, they don't. So maybe if you will tell them, we'll try to work on that.
Okay.
Next time.
So if anyone has kind of questions or you need clarity about today, my homework was kind of given to you before this workshop, which was, I don't know, good or bad. A couple people did get back to me. Some people were not able to get back to me. But what I wanted was a couple of case studies, and I did get one, and we'll kind of do that this afternoon. I want to talk to Paula before a break to make sure we're okay with that. But if people want to contact me, it's REV, the first 3 letters of Reverend.
REV,
Like Victor.
Yeah, Victor, thank you. RWM, my initials, Rebecca Warner Massini, RWM, at myfairpoint.net. MyFairPoint. Fair, FAIR, point, POINT, like period.
And what we did ask is that if there be one contact person for Rebecca, so not all 32 of you are in touch with her, but if you would have one person from your church that will be your connector to Rebecca. That's just protection of the teachers. And we failed to talk about feedback, and so if you have feedback about this session, on this form is my email address, and you can just let me know. We would like more breaks. We liked what Rebecca did, but we want to be responsive to what you need. So let us know that.
And also, we have talked for a long time. We got so excited when we had 9 churches and we talked about the workshops and recognized kind of just the courage and the time you're taking. I mean, we could not do this without you, and so this is for you, and I just really want to affirm and encourage you all in doing this. I think it's a really amazing thing you're doing. The next thing I have, I don't know if are there questions before I begin? Anybody want to have a burning issue before we start? I found this video called The Little Table. I thought it was really funny. Oh, some people know it. And I thought it would be a good example. I was hoping I could maybe get you to state your tables and think about triangles a little bit. So there are a ton of triangles or relationships in this video. So David was kind enough to figure out how to get my computer to the screen. And so I'm going to show the little table.
I don't know if people can see this. I tried to write down
Can
the
you put that
people.
up on the stage?
Oh, what a good idea. Thank goodness Holly's here.
Daughter of an architect, spatial relationship, there you go.
There you go. So I don't know if you can see that, but if you can't, I'll go over it after the video, and we might actually watch it twice if we need to. So I want you to watch it, kind of think about the players, you can maybe write them down, and go from there. So let's see, I think my sound's on. I'm just gonna play.
Hi, what's that? Oh, hi, these are flyers for game night. I was gonna put them out here in the lobby on a little table, but there isn't a little table to put them on. You need to buy a little table. A little table would be perfect right there.
I'll bring it up at the next board meeting. On that item, Marcia and I thought that we should buy a little table for the foyer.
Do we really need a little table? It would be nice if we had something to put our flyers on.
Can't we use the table that we already have? I think we have tables here. Well, we could, but they're a little big for the lobby. It's a little silly to buy a table when we have other tables. I understand that, but. Please watch your tongue tonight. I'm just talking about buying a little table at IKEA or Target. Don't be condescending. Do you think we don't know where to buy a table? I don't need you to tell me where we can buy a table. Is anyone else cold in here? Why is it so cold in here? Maybe someone can donate a table. That way we don't have to spend the money. Saving money, that's what we should do. Pissing away our money.
Melissa, do you know anybody who might donate a little table?
I don't think Harry Stein owns the Cherry Cafe. Maybe he can donate. Could you ask him, Melissa? That would be great. Okay, Melissa, did you have a chance to ask Harry about the table? Melissa, are you okay? I feel like I have to do everything. Why don't you call him? The table was your idea. I don't even think we need a table. In fact, I think this table is evidence of an overall systematic problem in our organization. So that's why you've been waiting to ask about a table? It's so cold in here. Can we turn the heat on? I think we should save money at every turn.
I agree 100% with my wife. It's how to money. Money on heat can be spent on a lot of things, like
this little table, we need one.
wait a minute, slow down there. There's a lot of variables that go into this decision.
Listen, I'm an ER nurse. I say goodbye. I don't make business decisions. I think we need to bring in a professional, someone who can really help us with this little table situation.
I'd like to thank our congregant, Jane Grossenberger. Jane is a very successful businesswoman.
Okay, we're going to talk business today. I have 39 dog grooming centers across 3 states, and we don't spend a penny unless it helps our bottom line. You understand?
Exactly. This little table is a business decision.
Still no decision on the table yet?
It's just a cheap little table. I don't even know why we're arguing about it. They just don't understand that this little table is a very important business decision.
I'm throwing money down the toilet. If this little table is no, I don't think so.
Okay, so we've got a consultant. His name is Jonathan, and Jonathan has a PhD in little table rocking. So he knows what he's talking about.
I want to start with an exercise. I want you to close your eyes. Imagine you're a game night flyer. Where would you want to nest? And when you wake up, you will know if you should be on a little table or not. Please make the check out to my corporation, not me, as an individual, $785 an hour, but we went over the hour mark. That's another $300.
What are you guys doing in here? Oh my goodness, it's Eleanor. She always thinks she has something really important to say, just like everybody else in the synagogue. Why do we spend our precious energy on things that just don't matter, when we could be out there helping the world, helping the needy, helping the kids that don't have food?
I think she's right.
I am so motivated. I'm going to change this world. Me too. Why do we get so bogged down by little things?
I appreciate that you all are feeling more connected to one another. But the fact remains, You still have flyers, and you still need a table on which to put them. Decision time.
Guys, these flyers are from 8 months ago.
Wait a second, these flyers are green. We didn't vote on that. Because green is God's favorite color and everyone knows it, so we didn't need a vote.
It's pretty funny, isn't it? Yeah. I was hoping if maybe like at your table, you could maybe draw some of the triangles that might have been in that video. And I have down some of the people. Marcia, she was the first person, it was her idea for the little table. And then you have the woman with the short dark hair, she agreed with the idea for the little table. And then this woman talked to her husband. Then there is the lady who says it's really silly. She's an ER nurse. She went home to her husband and was drinking Crown Royal or something with her husband. Then you have Melissa. She was the one that wanted to donate. And they said, why don't you talk to, she was going to talk to Carrie, who owns the Cherry Cafe. Then we had Melissa's husband, who is also on the council. And then the lady who kept bundling up, the cold lady. And then we had Jane Grossenberger, the businesswoman. Then Jonathan, the consultant, and Eleanor, who says important things. So I wondered if at your table, if you felt comfortable enough, you could ask me questions or you could watch it again. See if you could draw some triangles between some of these people. And if you don't know what line, you can say, all right, now this line between them is conflictual, or this one's distant, or this one, we had some fused relationships, I would say, with at least one married couple. And you could maybe get a sense of some triangles. Is that questions, or does that sound reasonable to do? Try. Yep.
Wants to be the artist.
Yeah, I put the players up, so I thought maybe people could add to this or disagree with it, or just, I just wanted to, hopefully give you a chance to,
The light helps.
Yeah, the
does
light,
it help? Does the light help?
it does actually.
Put it on this table in front.
Well, no, then,
Rebecca, how about this table right here in front?
Absolutely.
Well, that's a good idea.
No, I think it should be.
Put it on that little table. Put it on that little table. Oh, that's too close.
Too
That's
close.
too close.
No, I think he meant that table.
Oh, did you mean that table?
That's fine. No, that's fine.
See, we can act it out. We're the church. We can act it out.
I'm gonna do this after this.
So what did kind of people, so you can't see this in the back, can you? Do you guys want to move up? Would it help if we moved up? It's up to you. So just on this, I'll tell you what I did. I wrote down all players. So here's Martha, the initial woman who had the idea, the woman who likes Martha's idea, the husband of the woman who likes Martha's idea, the cold lady, Melissa, who wanted to donate the table and who was going to contact Jonathan, who owned the cafe. Then Melissa's husband, and they were smoochy, Melissa and her husband. So I put a close line between them. Then there was the ER nurse and her husband. And then there was Eleanor and Jonathan and Jane. Yes, Ruth.
Okay, I'm a little bit stuck because we were
Okay.
pushing to form triangles.
Right.
We've got a lot of things there that are not triangles.
All right, these are all triangles, but what I didn't make a good point before is triangles interact with each other. So you have many triangles. So here's a triangle between, okay, Martha, the initial idea, and Melissa.
Yeah.
And then the woman who likes Martha's idea. So that's
Right.
one triangle.
But what about like husbands on the periphery? Like woman who
The
likes
top.
Martha's idea and her husband, there's no closure to that, so.
Right,
So they're
right,
not
not
all
to her.
triangles
Just
then.
a list.
Yeah, they're all triangles, but like I could put a line here. Like there's definitely a line there, but it's probably not too visible. You wouldn't be aware of it. And you say, why is there a line there? Because they talk about her. She had the initial idea. So I wouldn't, that's not a triangle you're gonna be aware of, but it's there.
I see a triangle that I think needs to be in there, which is
Okay,
the
which is
ER nurse and her
Yeah.
husband and the temple.
Ah, that's a good
Because
one.
he was
Yeah.
then complaining that the temple was
Right.
taking all of his money.
And what was the temple gonna do for their grandchildren?
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I was thinking of the temple when Ruth was asking the question about the husband.
Right.
That the triangle was between the husband and wife and this body that was making the decision.
Right.
So the whole body was an
Yeah.
was an
Yeah,
item.
Yeah, we put the
Yeah.
committee down as a corner of the
Yeah,
triangle.
that's a good one too.
That was, that was a point in almost every one of our triangles.
Right. So it was
The council, the
the
committee,
council,
council,
yeah.
whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
We went with super simple back here.
Yeah.
And we basically, we started doing all of this, and then we went with pro table, anti-table, and the two consultants. So there was the pro and con solved their anxiety by bringing in the businesswoman and the consultant. And
Right.
deferring to a third party, two different third parties.
And that often happens in triangles when two people are anxious, they bring in a third party. And we do that with a consultant, we do that with a therapist, it can be done with a pastor. And it's not good or bad all the time, it just is. We
But
bring
it's why
someone in.
consultants can make a living.
Exactly. And some consultants are good and some rev up, they like transform up the anxiety. Yeah,
I saw the table happen.
yeah.
Did I miss a vote of the committee? How did it happen?
I don't know. That's a
Oh,
really
okay.
good question. How did it happen?
How
Maybe
did
got
it
an
happen?
idea, I think it's just kind of to me, it's just kind of a funny thing that, and I mean, when I thought about it, can that happen in churches? I think it kind of can. We get all revved up about something and then it does happen and you wonder, how did that happen? I often think it's God's grace, but,
Mission
It
is missing in there too.
what's
Mission.
mission?
And I think that was actually maybe one of the ways the table came into being, because Eleanor, is that her name? She came in and talked about what we're supposed to be
Oh,
doing,
yeah.
the food and all that. And then the consultant closed the door on her because it was
Yeah.
getting in the way of his making money. But they were all rallying around, that's right, we're here for mission, which is what the table was originally for too.
Do you think they all kind of agreed on that, about that?
I think they tabled their ego for just a little while.
Well, when she came in?
Now, the woman with that kept bundling up. And
Oh.
she, clearly was not wanting to, didn't feel comfortable enough to make a statement or have an opinion. So what part of the triangle was?
So my guess was her, the cold lady. I put distant lines here. I think she was probably one who is a little bit allergic, tell me if I'm right or not, to conflict.
Yes.
Yes.
Is that what you?
Not allergic,
Gotcha. Yeah. So she kind of, she put herself on the outside of any kind of these triangles.
But she's still part of the wider triangle with the committee, the temple.
Absolutely.
I mean, so she is connected and then she's disconnected. in several
Absolutely.
different places.
She's connected, but she's
Right.
distant. Yep.
And
That's
by
right.
not taking an opinion, that was a role.
Absolutely. She had a role of not taking, I'm the anxious one. Yeah. She did.
But would conflict be what part of the triangle?
I think conflict has to do with the relationships between people.
I think that would be the relationships. I had like a conflict between Martha and the ER nurse. I put a conflict line there.
Yeah.
I had one between the ER nurse and the woman who liked Martha's ideas. I thought there was probably a pretty interesting relationship. I thought they were kind of fused, the ER nurse and her husband, but I also thought there was probably conflict there, the way they talk to each other, like kind of with louder voices, and I guess they had an interesting relationship with Alice.
Well, conflict itself could be a part of point on the triangle, because the
I
cold woman
guess it
has a
could.
relationship with the board of the temple, and she has a relationship with an aversion to conflict.
Right, I guess that's what you were
So
saying.
then conflict would have to have a relationship.
Right, I guess it could, yeah.
So conflict, you're saying, would be a leg of the triangle?
Yeah.
Yeah, you could have a
Oh, that's an
mental
interesting-
construct of that, so she was like totally distant from conflict.
In the way.
And I think the ER nurse, my guess is she might like conflict. And my guess is this probably was distant between the cold lady and the ER nurse.
Yeah, I see conflict there if conflict is the pattern of the church, right? Like it's part of its historical identity. So in that way, because they moved from conflict over the table to then
The conflict over the green, yeah. That makes part of this. Yeah. And there's a bit of conflict, and I put a couple of, I had a line for cutoff. I had a conflict, I had a cutoff between Jonathan closed the door and Eleanor, who was the PhD in tables. I put a cutoff.
One of the things we kept struggling with a little bit was putting Marcia and her friend that first had the idea as one, or as the husband and wife as one, because you still could create a threesome with them as one. Do you ever?
You can do either. You know, it depends. If you're looking at kind of an emotional system, there might be times when you do them together and times when you do them separately, just to kind of observe what's going on. This is supposed to, they say that this is like putting, you know, the Invisible Man. Remember the Invisible Man? When you could see him when you put clothes on him. They say that drawing triangles, if you can do this, is kind of like putting clothes on the emotional system. You can see where the intensity of relationships are and where they're not. The other thing, when I work with clergy, and it's been done with me too, and clergy bring a case study, and so we go to the church and, you know, our supervisor will triangle everything. Then they take us back to our family of origin and they have us triangle our family of origin, and we'll see similar triangles. And it's like, oh, I'm on that kind of side of the triangle in the church, and I'm kind of, it's the same in my family. I'm like, oh, how interesting. You know, is there something I can do in my family to kind of shake up my relationship in this triangle a little bit, whether I get curious with the people I'm talking to, my family, my mom, my dad, or a cousin and an aunt, whoever. Can I just get curious, maybe shift that triangle a little bit? Will that shift where I am in the triangle in the church? So that's what I work on a lot. I work a lot on my family of origin and having relationships, hopefully mature relationships with everyone in my family of origin that's neutral. Because, you know, when we're in our family, sometimes, as I said, triangles in our families get rigid. And when they get rigid, it can affect our relationships outside of our family. But they say that by the theory, if you can have a mature one-on-one relationship with everyone in your family, that's the best thing you can do to grow up.
I gotta change it.
Okay. Anything more on this people want to say? We're going to take just a couple minutes while he's changing that, and I have a question for Paula because I'd like to move into the case study.
Yeah.
What I gave you, the next slide is this, CCL 2-1. I asked for some case studies and I got one from Paula Giles in Laconia. And so it's 2 slides and I guess I'll read it out loud. And she said, as our membership ages and shrinks, every aspect of church is challenged. Our committee structure. Do we have enough willing members to people our committees, worship services? We recently eliminated our long-standing 8 a.m. worship option. Outreach and mission. Fewer volunteers participated in Got Lunch. Got Lunch Laconia this summer, just to name a few. Change is inevitable, with the future looking different than the past, and will both be resisted and feared. Add to that the face that we have just welcomed a new senior pastor on whose shoulders too much responsibility for saving us may be heaped. And surely our challenges are evident. How do we live our mission in a changing world and grow in spirit as well?
You know, this doesn't relate to any other church at all.
Yeah, actually, I got another case study today, and I have to say it's like almost exactly like this. So I'm like, we're all in the right place. We're all dealing with some of the same challenges. The other thing that they mentioned was this past summer, they read this book together called Renewing the Mountains. And I do commend this. David's going to be talking about adaptive and technical change. Is that right? Yep. And that's in the book. There's family systems stuff in the book. But he uses, I guess he's a church pastor, but he uses the Lewis and Clark expedition to kind of make an analogy with the church in the 21st century. So it's very clever. You learn a lot about the Lewis and Clark expedition. And it's a good book. The author is Todd, T-O-D, Bolsinger, B-O-L-S-I-N-G-E-R. Thank you. So Paula said she'd be willing to respond to some questions I had. And I just wanted to kind of look at this a little bit, hopefully with the lens of bone theory. I know there's other people who have bone theory experience, and I hope that maybe you'll help me look at this too a little bit. So first, I want to hear a little bit about your church, Paula. Maybe size, where it is, context. You know, numbers of people on Sunday morning. If you have Sunday school for children and adults, you program. If you could just tell us a little bit about the Laconia Church.
So we have historically had an 8 o'clock and a 9:30 worship service. We just recently, in August, got rid of the 8 o'clock service. It had an average of 8 to 15 people usually. We have between 80 and 120 members that attend on a Sunday morning. We've had quite a bit of change in the last 5 years. Our senior minister retired in 2016, and we had an interim. There was about a 4-month period where we did not have any interim. I'm the associate, and we found an interim that came, but just before he came, we had our long-standing church administrator, who was a sole administrator for 22 years, was dismissed for violations of conditions of employment, so that caused a little upheaval. And so I was the only gay person at the time, and then the interim came. So, and now the interim left at the end of June, and just recently, a week and a half ago, the new senior, settled senior came. So we have, we do have an active faith formation youth class that can have 3 to 15 kids in it any given Sunday? One. And then we have a nursery that also could have 1 to 4. We have several different adult programs throughout the year. They're usually 6 to 8 week programs. We have a lot of mission work. We have 38 AA meetings a week in our building.
How many?
38.
That's great.
We have, we are part of Got Lunch Laconia, which delivers healthy food to kids throughout the summer. And this last summer, we delivered food to 541 children with 241 volunteers. So it's a community collaborative. We have an active loaning closet of walkers and medical equipment. We do other foods. We do lots of other things too.
How old is your congregation? When was it established?
1890s.
And you're kind of in the center of Laconia, right?
Downtown.
And have you always been there?
Yes.
And how was the population of Laconia?
There's about 16,000 people, but we have a very summery population as well. So we have a very, it's a summer resort area. So a lot of wealthy people have homes on the water, but they're only there for 4 months a year.
Any of them come to your church?
Yes. We also have a Taylor community, which is a elder community, which has homes and takes you to end of life if you pay enough to do that. Pay enough. So, and that's quite large. I don't know.
How many people?
A very large population. And we have at least 40 members of our church that live in Taylor.
The people that go to Taylor, are some of them from Laconia, or have they come kind of from out other places?
A little bit of both.
Majority away. And another aspect of our community is it's a very, there are a lot of transients. We have a very large population of social service recipients. We are in our county, we are the center of all social service.
You're the center, is it Belknap?
Yes.
County? Okay. So you're the center of all social services, and how does that impact the church? Or, I mean, you do the Got Lunch Laconia, is that kind of, you think, a response? To some of
Well,
that?
I think part of it is because of the job opportunities that are available in our area. That used to be large manufacturing area, and now there's not very little of the manufacturing. So our jobs tend to be more around vacationing and restaurants and hotels, and there is absolutely no public transportation in or out. Well, there's one bus. One senior bus. Yeah.
Are there losses that the community has faced, like in the last 10, 20 years, and is it around manufacturing? Wasn't Laconia State Hospital, was that a big
The
loss?
state school?
The state school, yeah.
Yeah, that was there before I was. That's a long time ago. We have a hospital, fairly large hospital, and struggling tremendously right now.
The hospital is struggling
Our
as all.
hospital recently discontinued their birthing center.
Maternity, yeah, that's been all over the state, we've heard about that. Yeah.
It's one of the areas also that has a huge substance abuse issue. So as most of us do, this last year in 2018, and I don't know what the big numbers are, but we've had 34 less deaths this year for heroin than we did last year, which is a huge, so you can just imagine how many we actually have had.
What's your annual budget, and do you have an endowment?
Yes, we have an endowment, annual budget, our treasurer's here.
Put me on the spot. The endowment's like $1.5 million. Budget, 200,000.
200, 250.
Are you drawing down the endowment?
Yes. It's a big concern right now, for the congregation.
About 40 a year?
Oh, what, out of the endowment?
Yeah.
Well, you know, it depends on the market and how it's doing, you know.
About 40 a year we're removing from it.
So if you got 1.5 endowment and you're drawing down 40, that's not drawing down the endowment, is it? I mean, you're still growing the endowment, right?
Yes,
You're not drawing down principal.
we're, yeah, no.
There's quite a bit of homeless population kind of in the area where we are. Pretty evident.
Is there a homeless shelter or how is that being addressed?
Well, there is, but of course you have to go into that, you have to be substance free.
Carry house.
Carry House, it's a Salvation Army. And we also have a new nonprofit, Belknap House, which is a nonprofit family shelter only that provides a lot more services to help families get back on their feet. But they're only a cold weather shelter, so they're only October through May.
And that's for families.
That's only for families. It's a hostel for the rest of the season, so they can earn money to run the shelter for the winter.
Let me ask, what are some challenges that the church has faced in its history?
Well, we just became open and affirming last November, which was, in my understanding, it was like our 12th attempt. But we never came to a vote before. But under the leadership of our interim, we did come to a vote and it passed by 80% over the age.
We did lose membership.
We lost some membership. How much?
Two families plus, 2 families plus.
How long have like the senior pastors generally stayed in your church? A fairly long time.
Warren Boughton was the pastor retired, and he was there 12 years. There was a 3-year interim time with 2 interim seniors, and then prior to that, it was a 30-year senior. And lots of associates.
Lots of associates. So how long have they had as associates?
Well, you've been 7 years now.
But there were associates prior to you, right, Paula?
Yes.
Lots.
There was a
Like,
period, where there weren't any associates. And then we had a Christian educator specific to those.
Under Warren, there was just a Christian educator.
How have the associates gotten along with the senior pastors generally?
I can only speak for my term. I've gotten along well with them. I think there was some transitions where a lot of times seeing the associates are just there for a short period of time, just by their choice.
So you're kind of one of the longer ones then?
Yes. Oh, I'm definitely the longest.
Are you the longest?
Yes.
So Paula, as the congregation ages and shrinks, is there any concern that the church doesn't need or can't afford associate clergy?
I'm sure there is.
Okay. I'm just thinking of that in terms of one of the family systems issues.
Mm-hmm.
You know, 80 to 100 people, one service. You know, the fact that you're not drawing down your endowment keeps you fairly safe in the position. But
it's a reality of and I think one of the decisions that was made when you called me to the position was that there would be a period of time that you would be drawn down from the endowment in order to fulfill this position.
Paula is very active in community activities and getting the word out into the community. So there's no plus there.
What would you say would be one of the biggest challenges the church in its history faced if you look back at the history of it?
We haven't had a lot of challenges
Like
as
no
a
fires?
church.
No?
No.
Well, we had fires.
Oh.
Like long ago?
Long ago.
Right.
Do you know how the church responded to fires?
They built a new building.
Was it at the same place they built, like there was a fire and did they build at the same property?
Yeah, but it was just, but they didn't remove the church, the one that had the fire. They didn't, no. They built a stone church instead of a wood.
There you go.
If you look at the history, would there be history about like how the church responded and, you know, how they freaked out or didn't freak out or how anxious they were or that they came together, like did it bring them together, did it pull them apart? Would there be any history about that?
There is. We have a little booklet that talks about it. And it seemed like the 6 men that were on the property and finance at that time just said, we're not going to have another fire. And so they were going to build a stone building. And that's what they did. They're in the history. There's not a lot written about any. That was just the way.
That was over 100 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. So this building that we're in was built in 1906.
From 1906. It would seem like you talking about that there's a pretty healthy response. It sounds like, at least kind of in the context and in the air and in the environment about that. So like I would perceive that your church is pretty healthy, has pretty healthy relationships, and is doing pretty well. Is that fair?
I don't think so. I think a lot of our challenges are external.
To the environment, the world, society, what's going on.
Right.
Yeah. Where's the energy in your church now? Where are pieces of energy?
I think the energy is around mission.
And like school, play.
Oh, it's mainly local.
Like the Got Lunch program.
Got Lunch and the ministry that we have to the AA and NA groups is big, as well as I think people are proud of the medical loan clauses. We have lots of people there, and then we do other food stuff too with Salvation Army and Hands Across the Table, and people are really involved. A lot of individuals are also involved in housing in different areas. Some people go to prison, so there's a lot of individuals in the church that also have their, so like we're gonna go to the family shelter and help clean to make the transition. So there'll be a group that does that.
That's a question. Maybe I missed something. Didn't you say you brought an ONA question 12 times before it passed this past year?
We didn't bring it up 12 times to vote. We talked about it 12
like
times.
10, so over a period of how long?
20 years.
Like 20 years of
Maybe not 12 times, but
a lot. It was brought up a lot, but we never had or felt the support of the congregation to bring it forward. So we developed it over that. And you said it passed this, when you did bring it forward, like 80%. Yes.
There was a committee that was charged to work on it. I think gained momentum to bring it forward, and then our senior pastor retired, and so they said, well, we're just gonna table this, and they put their committee on pause. And then when the interim came, and I think the congregation did a little healing, committee came off pause, and then became more of a conversation in the church. Because it was kind of this looming uncertainty, like, okay, are we gonna go through it? And I think it was necessary for us to kind of make it through that transition period from, the senior pastor being kind of the all making decisions into us really owning, making more of an ownership of the church.
So it's been about a year. You've had a little bit of fallout from it. But because you were saying you really don't seem to have any other conflict, I was wondering, is this an underlying space that there's still some sorts of contentions or concerns or whatever? It's new. Right. Are you still talking about it, or have you stopped talking about it completely?
The committee,
ONA, and now you stopped.
well, the committee's still formed and is still continuing to do education around all ONA issues. Just being aware that there's still people who are feeling. So it definitely was not an easy topic, but it was something that some people were really, really passionate about, and some people that, I think one of the things that we learned in the interim time was they did one of the Wordles. And one of the biggest things was, what's the best thing about your church? It was the people. So it was always all about individual people is what was most important to people. So that one family member of the church was really having a hard time thinking about leaving. It was really painful for other people to think that this would separate us.
Do you have an LGBT community in your church at all?
Not really.
What do you think made your church so persistent to do this over such a long period of time?
A lot of our members have family members who are part of the LGBT community.
Some our push for social justice, though, I mean, that's always, I just know that every time it's prayers and concerns, one member in particular or two will stand up and talk about social justice issues, not from an LGBT perspective, but more in an Israeli or Palestinian or world context. It's always about social justice. And I think that's been something that since I was a child in the church that's always about. And I think that's just what we identified, why mission is such an important piece to our congregation. And so I think it just became a persistent thing because we recognize that there's this community in our, or this part of our community that we feel that, that's also falls under the umbrella of social justice.
So persistent around people, population that are oppressed or, need to be lifted up and encouraged and loved and cared for when they have not been in society. Yeah, and that's kind of throughout the history. That's kind of inbred in everyone's. That sounds like a great strength that you have. Yeah. It's interesting, in reading yours and in thinking about other churches and kind of what we focus on, and we're all kind of focused on all the problems that are going on out there. Do you know what I mean? And this is a wondering I have. How helpful is that? I wonder. Like when I hear about your church and the energy you have, the persistence, you have everything you're doing in mission. And we all do that. All these churches, we get caught up about the nuns, the people who have no spirituality or religion, everything that's going on in society. And I'm curious about, what's that about? Do you know what I mean? Like we all focus on it. Do people know what I mean?
I don't
When
quite
you say
know
we're
what you mean.
focusing on it, you mean we're focused on how to get them into church?
Yeah, we focus on how to get them into the church. It's kind of like that fear of failure. We're all kind of afraid to fail. And I think that's one of the reasons why we're here. And and I'm part of the church too, so I'm part of that. But I'm wondering why that is, why we're thoughtful about that. When we're doing so well in so many areas. David.
Well, I'm picturing not just in Laconia, but churches like Laconia, this kind of a triangle, if you will. That one point or node of the triangle is the mission, the stuff that the programmatic involvement in the welfare of our community out beyond our doors. The second node of the triangle is internal, and that is you have an aging congregation. That means you have a heightened need for pastoral care, where there's people dying, there's grief, there's all of that going on. And then the place where that's managed is at the leadership center of the church. And so there's a built-in, hopefully creative, but possibly difficult tension between the energy investment in those people out there when our people in here need da 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 da. Okay, and the first giveaway that I had on this thing is the loss of the 8 a.m. service, because the people who used to go to that 8 a.m. service now are homeless in a sense. I came to a church that had dropped its 8 a.m. service during the interim, And every single one of the people who'd gone to that 8 a.m. service was not going to go to 10 a.m. and they were going to sit home and grieve. And hardly anybody knew that that was what was going on.
Because they didn't notice that they weren't there,
Well,
or?
It just, it just dwindling resources, dwindling investment. It's like, okay, we have an 10 o'clock service, you can come if you want. That was the general, I'm not saying everybody was that inconsiderate, but the general attitude was, look, we can't continue this. It's an inadequate and an inappropriate investment of resources, okay? But that didn't take into account the 8 to 15 people for whom that was their church. Their church was not the 10 a.m. service.
So is it addressing the loss when something like that happens?
Right.
Do churches have the capability to address a loss of that? Do we have the strengths? Do we have the capabilities we need to address that loss?
Well, yes, that's a good question. But what I was picturing in terms of triangling is you've got a leadership group in the church that's trying to manage the mission, and the mission is both the mission to the constituency within the house, within the community of faith, whose needs are challenging, and this very ambitious of this particular congregation to the community. I think it sounds like in Laconia it's a fairly healthy thing, because one of the questions I was going to ask is, are people in the church generally proud and supportive of the way the building is being used by outside groups? Because one of the things that can happen in a situation like this is, oh, you've got all those drunks and addicts coming in here. Did you see the way the bathroom looked? That kind of stuff happens in a church where you're starting to feel this tension between the needs of our own constituency being shortchanged because all those needy people out there are getting the investment of time and energy and whatever.
Does any of that let me ask Paul, does any of that sound true, not true?
We're very fortunate that people are proud of the things that we're doing in the community. And when we had, this is one of my prouder moments, was last winter, starting before Thanksgiving, we had a homeless woman who was in her 30s who was sleeping on the front porch of the church, and it has a shelter on it. And the bank across the street kept calling and saying, yes, we're feeding her, we're giving her food, we're giving her coffee. And not once did any member of the church ever say, get rid of her. That wasn't the response. The response was, can't you do anything? Can't you help her? And there's huge mental health, and I spent way too much time trying to get her help. But we ended up moving her to sleep right below my window and got her through the winter. And finally there was an incident, and we had to ask her to give a trespassing order because of an incident. But that was like 7 months. But no, to get rid of, which.
But the triangle still exists. It's just, in your case, it's not destructive. That's
right. And with the 8 o'clock people, they were a part of this decision. It just didn't get imposed or constantly asked, and they were included, although they were not the decision makers.
It sounds like you have a healthy way of going through. I mean, the persistency of 20 years for open and affirming sounds like you're very principled, thoughtful in making changes.
Most of the
time.
So one of the things I was thinking of is David mentioned the thinking a lot about how we do all this stuff outside the church, or sort of you started. But so one of the things that probably could help this 8 a.m. worship change is to have a memorial service for it, have a funeral for it, to acknowledge that this was a place that people came to, and this was their worship service. So in the sense that a lot of energy was spent to help this woman sleeping on the porch, but no energy was spent helping this 8 a.m. worship group.
Well, we don't know that.
Well, all right. Well, from just
that's
how many people? I mean, do we ever think like that? Like,
well, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, you're thinking like that, so that's something that you would do. I don't know if it would be helpful.
No, I'm just I'm definitely not casting dispersions. I was just thinking of something David said about how there was an early morning worship service at his church, and then people went away angry So I'll just say David's church perhaps did not have sort of, and I think we just don't think of this in a church. Like, we're busy doing all this other stuff. That's where I was going, was we're busy worrying about all these other things. We don't stop to think about how we might have impacted our own people when we when we
change.
throw them out or create change.
So that's a good question. How do we, when we're in the midst of change, how do we impact people? One of the things I wanted to throw out with the theory is, or what I'm trying to do, asking Laconia questions, is you guys have an enormous amount of strength and courage and stuff within you to deal with any of these questions or anything else going on in your church. So my reason for asking questions is to possibly get at some of that is in your history, is in your founding, is already in you guys, and how you dealt with past challenges as you go forward. And one of the questions I had that kind of came from David was around energy. How are you all feeling? Is that a question around energy between taking care of people in the church and mission outside the church, or do you feel that's pretty balanced?
We have a lot of volunteering and a lot of energy in the church, I think, for both subjects, you know, in both inside and outside. One of the things I think we may have a little challenge with is getting the same people over and over doing the same committees or the same jobs. So we don't have the resources for the newer energy companies.
I think, you know, the congregation is aging to the point where I just don't think there's much coming in on the younger age groups. Like, we're all going to be here in that, you know, we're talking about kind of what we've accomplished. But our concern is membership coming in because people that are passing away. It's definitely something I see coming.
That you're going to have less membership.
Yeah, it's already happening.
Again, I wonder, one of my wonderings is it helpful to think about that? You know, will that help you today in figuring out who and what you're called to be? Maybe it is. It's a question I have about that. Is that helpful to focus on that where you are now?
Yeah, you can do that.
Do you think you have to?
Yeah.
I think it's a balance of being aware of that population, the older population is shrinking, but it also has to be a balance of as we reach out and as we seek, membership's not going to look the same in 10 years as it did 10 years ago. And so what does that mean? So we're doing Got Lunch, and we put a lot of energy and a lot of effort in it, but it's not bringing in dues.
Not bringing new members, not bringing in budgets.
It's got new people that spend the whole summer in the church that wouldn't normally be there, but it's not bringing members. So I think that's the challenge with Canoeing the Mountains is, okay, if membership shifts so that people in their 20s and 30s are joining things, what does that look like? So I think there's going to be a balance between not maybe being focused on the loss, but charging through the fear of the change of where resources come.
What the changes might look like and living into them. The other question I have, is there a history in your church of looking at the senior pastor to save you?
I think the senior pastor has just been, has just been traditionally like the one to make the decisions.
The senior pastor has been the one to make the decision?
Make the decisions and try to steer the church and for so long. And so when we didn't have that for a period of time, we're in that period of transition. I think that we have to start taking control and the reorganization. And I think there's still a part of, I know there's still, if I feel it, there's still this want to have that kind of pastoral, caretaker there. And so there's still that feel of not necessarily saving. I don't know if we need saving, but there is somebody that we're looking for somebody to pay. We've got it on our feet, but now we need somebody to drive the train. Like we've got the train back running, and we all know how to be mechanics now, but where are we going to go with it? And I think we're looking for that.
So it sounds like you're kind of you want to go back to kind of what the homeostasis was with a senior pastor?
No,
that's
I
not
don't
there.
think so. I think we need somebody to have vision. We're looking to bring us all together. Like we're all very comfortable in driving the train now, but we just don't know where to go. And so I think that's the saving is we need somebody to now vision, like to and how
To
get
provide
there.
some dreams and visions. And how's the congregation going to keep figuring out like your own dreams and visions and see if they mesh with the pastor? Do you know?
Well, we did that when we did the search process.
Okay.
A lot of
So you think you have a pastor that meshes with your dreams and visions? Are you going to check it out?
I was on the search committee, so I hope we got it right.
Another week and a half.
David?
I'm curious about another theme that I kind of hear as I'm listening to the story, which was, so there was the talk about the fire and the replacement of the wood building with the stone building, right? This concept that will be in place for a good long time. And then a 30-year pastorate, and did you say like a 12 or 14-year pastorate? And which is a declining kind of a thing, right? Like, so here was this long term, and then not that I want to say 12 or 14 years isn't a good long term. I can't, wow. But that's less than 30, and we see a lot of churches around us with 5 or 6 being more consistent. And then layering on that, this concept of long-term members, and now they're aging, and newer people coming in, and if your church is like a lot of others, they're not there as long. There's a greater level of turnover in and out and shorter tendencies. And so is part of the anxiety, the needing to learn, what does it mean to not be such a prolonged place? Like, how do we deal with a community of transition? That things aren't the forever that they once were with the stone building that will be there forever, but now we're dealing with people in place, giving their gifts and then moving on, and new people coming in and giving their gifts and moving on. And how do we learn a new identity with that? That's intensely anxiety provoking, right? Because I don't know that that's your case, but that was a theme that I heard in sort of this whole bit of what once could be forever is now shorter term.
So like more changes
With
in a
greater
short amount of
frequency.
time with more frequency.
And
yeah.
new faces where you could once count on those people being there forever. Now you can't count on people being there as long. So how do we adapt to that greater level of turnover?
That's interesting, because that's what the city council is focusing on these days as well, is the transition and how to get more people to come in to stay.
Yeah.
To instead of being just the summer people or the transients.
Do you think that's going on both at church and community?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I may be projecting on there, but from what I am hearing, that you've got this wonderful history of being a church that looks outward and has all kinds of incredibly wonderful ministries, but with the declining membership are concerned about sustaining this legacy that you've had. And I know that that's something, in my church, people see themselves in one particular way, that we have these ministries and we do this, but we're not able, maintaining that, sustaining that is getting harder and harder and harder, but no one wanting to let go of any of that because it feels like a failure. If you stop doing X or stop doing Y, it feels like a failure, and there's this incredible push to sustain these ministries that began a very long time ago, but you don't have the same people in the church. Because I'm speaking for me now, not because I don't know you. But we don't have the same people in the church who had those exact same visions, but to let go of something that we've done for so long is painful.
So is it helpful to look at how your congregation historically and recently has been able to let go, and how you've done that, and how you've managed that letting go, and what gifts and skills and strengths you have to do that?
Is it helpful for the church?
Would it be helpful for the church to do that for your church? David?
One of the things that Paula brought up that we haven't unpacked since she brought it up was the dismissal of the administrator. And my sense is you have a person who's worked in that position for 22 years. That brain has the institutional memory of the church. I mean, there's stuff in the file cabinet, but the brain of the administrator for that length of time, and I've known a number of people who've served admirably in those positions in other churches. And if you have a what I want to say, an easy transition from that person retiring to someone else taking the job, it's a whole lot. It sounds like what happened here was something that was abrupt. And so, you know, where is the institutional memory of the Laconia Church right now? Paula hasn't been there long enough to go back to Barry. That's the 30-year pastor. You know, so it really creates a very different, I mean, this in some ways is following up on David's point, really creates a very different kind of base of character of the church that you almost have a chance to invent yourself all over again. But what you don't want to do is lose sight of the institutional memory that was carried by that person and by other legacy people in the church. It just occurred to me, it was kind of interesting that when you asked what was traumatic in the church, that wasn't brought up as another opportunity. And it strikes me that there's some things to that will make it hard for the new pastor coming in. Where does that new pastor get that long inside story that people like that tend to carry?
Are there people that hold the institutional memory?
Oh, yes, but not the administrator. There are some people in the church who actually used to work in the office, but it's still, where on earth could that possibility? What, it's just, there's still all the time that issue. But I have to say one thing, that when you talked about the longevity and how the church dealt years ago with trauma, when we dismissed this person within 2 weeks, there were 11 people volunteering to help in the office, so that the office was always covered, because our office is always open 9 to 4 every day. So within 2 weeks, we had a schedule of people that could handle. So there's a tremendous amount of resiliency and willingness to really serve in this church. That's phenomenal.
And I think this is part of what you started out the day with, Rebecca, that is so important, is that our human nature tends to be to focus on our struggle and our negativity, which feeds into our fear. But one of the things that family systems provides us with is a capacity to see these wonderful, wonderful strengths that get passed down generation to generation to generation. These capacities to survive and to grow and to thrive in new contexts, right? This is and so I think it's really great that you're lifting up your resiliency, and while also what David's saying is don't forget to name the pain and the violation of trust. Because when we deny them, we hide them, but when we name them, we deal with them. And
was the administrator a member of the church? And is the new administrator a member of the church?
One is a member of the. So there was a change of restructuring.
As she continued,
He.
Has he continued to be an active member of the church? No, he's not.
But part of the family has.
Yeah. One of the things that you mentioned that really caught my attention, the fact that you're doing all of these things within the church and that you've got a lot of people rushing in to do the jobs that need to be done, but that you tend to pull from the same pool of people. And I think that's something, all of us are dealing with one time or another, that the church we've always talked about this 80-20 rule where 20% do 80% of the work. And it's pretty consistent in all of the churches that I've served. But as that pool of people, doesn't really change a great deal over time and continues to age, I think that just adds a tremendous dimension to the anxiety, because so much of our sense of the success that we're having in the church is kind of defined without it being expressed very much, but it's kind of defined by keeping the things going that we have always done, that we have derived success from in the past. And it can be a real challenge for a smaller pool of people to keep the same number of ministries going.
How are we going to redefine our success or our mission as we're all need to do?
We had a long-standing tradition of doing a Thanksgiving dinner for 30, 40 years. And then eventually people that were really the centerpieces of putting that on passed away. And it was anything, we got to have the dinner. And then eventually, when the one people stepped forward, we said, well, we have to let it go. And we let it go until a couple of years later, somebody else felt strongly enough about it and resurrected it.
But you were able to let it go. Yeah.
And to bring it back, which is really cool.
Yeah.
The fact that you could do both, and that there's, okay, you don't have to hold on to
You
this
see
thing
some
just because you've
flexibility.
always done it, but if there's fresh energy, we can do something.
Yeah, ours was a picnic on the lawn in September, and the people who had always done it weren't able to do it 2 years ago. And so we tried to get somebody to step in, and nobody would, so we let it go. And then the same people who had been doing it forever came back, and this year felt that they had to do it again. And so they did it, and it was successful. And I was speaking with the one man who was responsible after the thing, and I told him we really appreciated all the effort he put into this. And his comment was, well, it wasn't like it used to be.
Well, he's right. He's right.
It was great, but it wasn't like it used to be. So,
Paula and Laconia, do you have anything to close up, or did you get any insights from anything people said, or took away anything?
Drawing on the history is something that is, I think, as good as being interesting as we move forward this time, not just focus on the future, but check back and see everything.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. Do people have any questions or anything as we kind of close out the day?
Actually, Rebecca, as I was looking over the course synopsis, it seemed to me that I'm not sure how much we've really addressed. What does it look like for church leaders to be responsible to the congregation, mature, flexible in their responses, and clear in themselves? We talked about differentiation earlier, but so just anything you can do to sum up of how family system impacts church anxiety and our ability to be competent leaders, just in way of summary. I know we've talked about it and around it, but I wondered if there was anything specific you wanted to add.
I guess I would go back to one of the questions is, what difference can a leader's functioning make in a congregation? It makes a difference if a leader
is acting in a functional, self-differentiating manner. It makes a difference in the system. It makes a difference if lay people are doing that too, but the L position, the leader position, is a specialized position in the congregation. And when a leader can act maturely and be clear, it can really change the function. Not always. There's some churches where it will be much, much more difficult to change. Dave and I were talking about that. There are some environments that you can change by, in your families, you can maybe make a difference if you calm down and you're more connected to everyone. And there's other families where there's so much cutoff and so many kind of challenging relationships that your functioning doesn't make too much of a difference. And that can happen in churches too, but it can make a huge difference what the church does. So for church leaders to be responsible to a congregation means a church leader would not be doing the congregational thinking and feeling for them. I can speak as a pastor, it's really difficult not to take on your congregational responsibility, not like that thing about the shoulders of the pastor saving us. We do look to our pastors for a lot. So it's kind of for a congregation and pastor to be clear, these are my roles, these are my responsibilities. I think to always kind of think that in your head is really helpful for a congregation to be like more healthy and go forward and move forward in a good manner. Yeah.
Rebecca, I think one of the terms that helps in how leadership takes on this role, regardless of what that means leadership was, is empowerment. And so these positives and the things that you're asking them to focus on, and et cetera, it's about, again, finding that empowerment place where they have skills, spaces, et cetera, to utilize so that they can affect change by being a non-anxious present, by all of the other pieces that you've been connecting together.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. And you know what's interesting? Ed Friedman, who we mentioned, the rabbi who kind of brought family systems into the church, he said that what he was into was justice training. Yep. And what's interesting about that is, like, if I am doing my congregation's responsibilities, that's not justice. That's not justice for anybody. If I am thinking for someone, if I am not challenging them to be as mature and clear as they can be, that's not justice for anybody. So I do think there's a lot about that. This kind of thinking is justice training, that people are lifted up to be who and what God calls them to be in the world. And you don't do things for other people and they don't do things to you.
What this has done for me with regard to the congregation I'm serving now is thinking about disruptions in the relatively recent past of my church's life, which are not talked about in the present in a formal place. And one of the things I think we think about, we come together for board and committee meetings. God help the minister who says, we need to talk about what happened 7 years ago. Well, the meeting's already gone on longer than we wanted it to. I'm missing Jeopardy. So to bring it up in those formal settings, I don't think is particularly helpful. But to look at the informal settings where we can note that a disruption that had a significant impact on the life of our church, within the lifetime of the people who are still there, can be rethought and can bring some awareness in those informal conversations the way we do business today. Because I think one of the things, you look at this generational stuff that's part of family systems and the emotional cutoff, all of that is stuff that many congregations have experienced sometime in the lifetime of the people that are still here. And well, that was back then. Well, no, it really isn't. The past is not really past. But finding ways to allow that insight to be useful in the present is, I think, an art form that needs to be cultivating.
That is a good art form, and sometimes we bring it up in a committee because we're anxious, you know, and I think it's important to think about when is the right time to talk about the past of the church.
So I was driving home from a funeral on Wednesday. It turned out that the president of my executive board and I were driving in the car together. We had an hour and a half that we had to put up with each other. And over the course of that, she's new to the congregation. And I'm relatively new to the congregation as well, 6 years. Over the course of that period of time, we were able to kind of look at some pieces of the church's history in a creative, you know, car ride kind of way that I think helped us both. And I think looking for those opportunities and thinking about how we can understand the way that the past is impacting on our decision-making skills, our resiliency skills, our change willingness skills in the present is extremely important. It's just finding the place to do it.
I think just getting curious about it, and I think you're right, talking one-on-one is a good place, but getting curious about things is often good. Often works really well one-on-one, or even in committees, if something comes up and you're like, I kind of remember this about the church. How did the church deal with that? Because I'm kind of making an analogy to what we're doing now. Yeah. You can be curious. Yes.
One last thing, I'd like to say, expression of gratitude to Laconia for having the courage to sort of display themselves and allow us to engage in conversation. And I think it's so important as these 9 churches grow over these next 2 years together, the many ways in which we'll each have that opportunity to be exposed, but not out of critique, out of a sense of courageous learning and growing. And it means sometimes we feel really vulnerable, but the end of it is we kind of grow. I think there's a great story, right, Rebecca, you'll be able to tell it. Owen going back to his family to apply his theory of his family and like all the anxiety that came and the disruptions that came with that. But then in the end, it was this wonderful understanding and insights he had, how we can do that too. If we had this chance to think about what we're learning and what's going on, and then go back into our church families and kind of play with these concepts. Some of them will be disastrous, and others will be amazing. And just to give ourselves the freedom to do that. So thank you for being the first courageous step forward. It was really amazing.
And as I said, I bet there are other case studies that came in that were just asking so many of the same questions about mission and the future and kind of this society and just, you know, all this, what's it going to look like? So no quick fix, but you ask the questions, which is great. I would like to close with a good friend of mine from Scotland sent this from Walter Brueggemann. It's clear that the church needs no more custodians to keep it running the way it has been. It now needs no more pastors or leaders who will conduct business as usual, because we are in an emergency situation in our society where the gospel matters decisively. What the church now requires by faith, I suggest, is to run risks for justice in a brutalizing society, is to run risks for forgiveness in a vengeful society, is to run risks for hospitality in an exclusionary society, is to run risks for generosity in a parsimonious society, is to run risks for the scandal of Easter resurrection in a society that reduces everything to our reasonable possibilities, is to run risks for poetic imagination in a society of prosaic anxiety. One of the things I love about that is I think he captures the Christian faith, the best of the Christian faith, about what we are about justice and forgiveness and hospitality and generosity. And we also are risky. We live courageous lives, and we have that all in us to live that way amidst all the challenges that are out there in the world. So I give you all credit once again for taking part of this. Thanks for letting me be the kind of guinea pig for first, and they were all very wonderful, and I look forward to the other presenters and times ahead. As I said, I'll be around for most of the workshops, and would love to talk to anybody about anything. If you start studying bone theory, this is a taste of bone family systems theory, and I'm happy to do that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.